Chapter 1003. The cooling medicine entered his mouth and was swallowed into his stomach along with the blood in his mouth. Qing Beijiang's dazed mind seemed to have been greatly stimulated, and he immediately became much more clear-headed. He didn't hear the girl in front of him introduce herself. However, he was able to see this beautiful face clearly. Huangfu. Qing Beijiang opened his mouth. Miss Huangfu. Her code name was Peerless Beauty, her surname was Huangfu, and her given name was Qiushui. If the eternal sword above Mormons ended the Sword Emperor era of the Wang family of Beihai and ushered in the current East Emperor era, then in this era, in more than 2 years, Huangfu Qiushui could almost be said to be the first person of the young generation. She was not much younger than Li Tianlan and Zhang Shangyu. However, the huge gap in status also formed a vague but extremely distinct age gap. Li Tianlan, who was less than 25 years old this year, was fully qualified to be the top expert of the young generation in Zhongzhou State. But the title of the number 1 expert of the young generation was almost an insult to him. Next year's ranking on the divine list was where Li Tianlan should be. In the era when the young Donghuang reached the peak, the names of Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao were no longer on the list of the top 10 experts of the young generation in Zhongzhou State. Huangfu Qiushui ranked first among the top 10 experts of the young generation in Zhongzhou State this year. Huangfu Qiushui of the Sky Academy. With the strength of the peak of the fire-flaming realm, he had killed more than 6 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in more than 2 years since he entered the school and went out on several missions. Everyone had always thought that as long as she successfully entered the thunder-shocking realm, her actual combat capability would not be weaker than most superiors of the half-step invincible realm. Among the students from the 2 academies who were in the same batch as her, there were no students who were even qualified to see her back, let alone those who were on par with her. She was truly the best in the world. She was even more dazzling than Li Tianlan was in the 2 academies at that time. Because there was no comparison. Everyone would think that Huangfu Qiushui was the champion. Her code name in the Sky Academy was Stunning Beauty. Many people who knew the inside story knew that she was the only student of summer solstice. But after more than 2 years in the Sky Academy, everyone was surprised to find that with every progress she made, her martial arts were essentially different from that of the Wang family of Beihai. Especially her sword energy and sword intent, they were almost completely different from those of the Wang family of Beihai. If one had to compare them, the current Huangfu of the sword energy and sword intent of water were closer to Li Tianlan's swordsmanship. It was not the swordsmanship of the Li family. It was Li Tianlan's swordsmanship. Therefore, although Li Tianlan had not left the desert prison for a long time, as he fought again and again, the title of His Majesty became more and more stable. At the same time, Huangfu Qiushui, who deliberately approached him with sword qi, gradually began to be called Little Donghuang. She had not entered the thunder-shocking realm yet. But her actual combat capability was already at the forefront of Mount Dibbing. Qing Beijiang stared blankly at her figure with a complicated look in his eyes. He knew very well what Huangfu Qiushui's appearance meant. It was impossible for such a young man with limitless potential to appear alone. Huangfu Qiushui's arrival meant that the real high-end combat capability of Beihai had left Mount Dibbing and appeared on the battlefield. It also meant that the floating island and Xingzhou behind Liuli City had been cleared. The high-end combat capability of Beihai rushed to Liuli City in the shortest time. Next, it was the most ferocious counterattack. It seemed to be confirming his thoughts. In the snowy night sky, streaks of sword light suddenly appeared one after another. The blue sword light and thunder crisscrossed in the boundless night sky, radiating cold light. The dense sword light danced in the night sky of Liuli City and scattered in different directions. The faint sounds of fighting in different directions in the distance seemed to stop at this moment. Boom! A loud noise suddenly came from the block closest to Qing Beijiang. The blue sword light flying in the sky suddenly fell to the ground. The endless sword light with surging blue electric arc spread wildly, almost covering the whole block in the blink of an eye. The surging sword energy spread wildly. More than a dozen elites of Jifeng Sword Raining School around the sword light were torn into pieces of flesh and blood in an instant. The blue electric light swirled and rose on the ground. An old man's figure had rushed out of the electric light and appeared directly behind a visiting professor of the thunder-shocking realm of Jifeng Sword Raining School. Crack! The old, skinny but extremely hard arm directly smashed into the opponent's back. The spine was torn under the great force, and the internal organs were completely shattered at the same time. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. The old man, covered in blood, threw away the dead thunder-shocking realm expert in his hand and looked down at Jifeng Sword Raining School, which had subconsciously stopped fighting. An elite of the school. Blood rolled down the old man's clothes. He stood high in the sky, looking down with his head down. The old face faced a large number of elites of Jifeng Sword Raining School, with an indescribable fierceness and rudeness. The Wang family of Beihai, punishment is here. Boom! In the deafening noise, the whole block was shaking wildly. The surging and endless lightning occupied everything. Thunder and lightning rolled. Countless elites of Jifeng Sword Raining School were directly smashed by the thunder sea that the old man broke out with all his strength before they even had the thought of escaping. The red light flashed in the sky, and the lightning shuttled back and forth. More and more experts rushed to Lioli City at full speed. The sound of the helicopter whistled across the sky. The fierce battle continued. It was the voice of Beihai. The voice belonging to the Wang family of Beihai rang in every corner of Lioli City. It was earth-shattering, and the fighting intent soared to the sky. Firmament from the Wang family of Beihai is here. Enchantress from the Wang family of Beihai is here. Wasp from the Wang family of Beihai is here. Phoenix from the Wang family of Beihai is here. All heaven's troops from the Wang family of Beihai are here. Who else? Different voices with strong auras resounded throughout the city. In the next second, earth-shattering cheers and roars suddenly rang out. In an instant, the situation in every corner was reversed. In front of Cheng Beijiang, Huangfu Qiushui looked down at the seriously injured middle-aged man and whispered, "Why don't you retreat?" Retreat? Cheng Beijiang smiled sadly. Where can we retreat to? We are the warriors of Beihai and even the trump card. If we retreat from Queen City to Lioli City, where else can we retreat to? Do we retreat all the way to Xingzhou and even seek the protection of Mount Dibing? We are warriors. We have the best treatment in Zhongzhou State and even the world. We are equipped with the most advanced armaments and have the best logistics. We are the guardians of Beihai, not the burden of Mount Dibing. We are warriors. How can we retreat? Cheng Beijiang whispered, we can't retreat. Huangfu Qiushui looked down at him for a long time. You're right. She whispered, we can't retreat anymore. Cheng Beijiang straightened his body and struggled to get up. He repeated the last order he heard in a low and hoarse voice. Move forward or die. Chapter 1004. It was 4:15 in the morning. From the beginning of the final battle in Beihai until now, the power of Mount Dibing had officially entered the battlefield. This was not the most critical moment, but it could definitely be said to be the most tragic time. The frenzied killing aura had infected everyone. Smoke filled the air, and blood flowed like a river. Tiny electric arcs surged and flickered in the thick blood. The enchantress stood in the center of the street. With her body as the center, there were charred corpses and wounded people everywhere. The crackling sound of the electric current filled every space around her. She looked at the ruined streets and the large number of corpses around her. Her usually seductive face was almost instantly twisted to the extreme. The Wang family of Beihai, the enchantress. Many people in the dark world knew that the enchantress was born in Lioli City. She grew up in an orphanage in Lioli City. After leaving the orphanage, she lived on the relief fund of Mount Dibing. Beihai never treated her badly, nor did Lioli City. For this land and this city, she had a love and attachment that could not be understood by those who were not involved. This was Beihai, for which she had devoted her whole life and could even sacrifice her life without hesitation. But now it was a mess. Joint forces, East Island, the Dark World, all the enemies, how dare you? Why did you do that? The enchantress's eyes suddenly became scarlet. They rushed through Xingzhou and the floating island. The extremely powerful force easily crushed all the chaos over there. Everyone thought that the result would not be too bad. But after passing the floating island and coming to Lioli City, it was like stepping from the human world into purgatory. You all deserve to die. Bang! The dense electric current suddenly exploded with the enchantress as the center. The electric current spread rapidly in the air, rolling up a large amount of flying snow. Two figures were forced out in the sky full of electric arcs. The enchantress stared at the two figures and said in a hoarse voice, "You deserve to die." The enchantress. In the air, a very tall white European looked a little pale, but his eyes were full of boundless anger and majesty. "Get out of the way now, and I can pretend that nothing happened." "If you deserve to die," the enchantress repeated. She was very familiar with the white man in front of her. He was also an old opponent whom she had fought before. He was one of the Grand Knights of Knights Templars, an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, codenamed Holy Sword. The companion beside him should be a visiting professor of Jifeng Sword Raining School, a thunder-shocking realm expert. Of course, the two of them were not afraid of the enchantress. However, with the entrance of the high-end combat force of Mount Dibbing, they obviously did not want to stay here. They intended to temporarily withdraw from Lioli City, return to Kanglan Province, and then fight with Mount Dibbing. As for the key to the outcome of the battle, it was not here. The high-end combat power of Mount Dibbing could appear here, which meant that the elites of the joint forces had completed their tasks. The guards of Mount Dibbing must be empty at this time. When the invincible realm experts of the joint forces took down Mount Dibbing, all the people of the joint forces would attack the remaining forces of Beihai with several invincible realm experts from the north and south. Then, it was time to reap the fruits of victory. Holy Sword looked at the time and snorted coldly. He ignored Yao Ji and said in a deep voice, "Let's go." He didn't even have time to move. The enchantress had already appeared in front of him. A scream that almost tore his eardrums suddenly sounded in his ears, with hysterical killing intent and madness. "You deserve to die." The phantoms shuttled back and forth. In the place where Yao Ji originally stood, countless thunderbolts suddenly weaved into a huge and dazzling blue halo of sword energy. The moment the halo was formed, she had already appeared in front of Holy Sword. The air was violently shaking and twisting. Yao Ji stretched out her palm, and a shining whip of thunder and lightning appeared in her hand. Without any hesitation, Yao Ji clenched the long whip and threw it at Holy Sword. The enraged Holy Sword suddenly roared and punched the enchantress's head. The distance between the two sides was quickly shortened. The thunder whip constantly shrank on Holy Sword's huge and burly body. Bang! The long whip shrank to the extreme, and a large number of electric arcs suddenly exploded. At that moment, the space distorted in a shape visible to the naked eye. The space and electric arcs that were completely out of control continued to collapse toward Holy Sword, tearing his body. His fists were still waving forward, but his body was directly imprisoned in place at the moment when the long whip exploded. An incomparably violent blue thunderbolt blasted out from his fist. At the same time, the guest of Jifeng Sword Raining School, who had been advancing and retreating with him, was like a ghost. He glided quickly under the night sky and stabbed at Yao Ji's heart with his sword. Thunderbolts and sword light, one in front and one behind, completely blocked Yao Ji's path of action. Yao Ji's body rotated gently. In an instant, her figure disappeared from their line of sight without any warning. Holy Sword was suddenly shocked. Dazzling thunderbolts instantly burst out from another direction. That was where Yao Ji had been standing before she rushed to them. At this moment, the halo of sword energy she left in place kept flashing. Yao Ji instantly appeared where the halo was as if she had teleported, and her eyes grew colder and colder. This is, Holy Sword's pupils shrank slightly. He had fought with the enchantress several times on different occasions, so they knew each other very well. As an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, the enchantress's rapid phantom shuttle could be said to be her signature unique skill, and the void chain entangled him. He was no stranger to her, but at this moment, the enchantress gave him an extremely unfamiliar feeling. He couldn't understand Yao Ji's way of retreat. In the previous many fights, Yao Ji didn't have this kind of means. Half-step invincible realm, Holy Sword murmured to himself. Before he could finish his sentence, the enchantress disappeared from his sight once again. Watch out. Holy Sword's face suddenly changed. Facing a peak of the thunder-shocking realm and facing a half-step invincible realm, although it sounded like there was only half a realm difference, in fact, the gap could almost be said to be huge. In the same way. Phantom Shuttle. Yao Ji appeared in front of Holy Sword in an instant. A halo of sword energy that looked a little weak quickly formed under her feet. Crack. Space vibrated. The moment the essence, chi, and spirit were completely condensed, a spear made of pure thunderbolts appeared in Holy Sword's hand. He held the spear and directly stabbed forward without any hesitation. The halo of sword energy shone in front of Holy Sword. Yao Ji's figure disappeared again. She made 2 phantom shuttles almost without any interval. The enchantress, who was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, didn't have enough physical strength to make 2 consecutive shuttles without stopping. There was no doubt that the current enchantress was a real half-step invincible realm. Behind you. The sword light was dazzling. The guest of Jifeng Sword Raining School suddenly drew his sword. However, it wasn't a forward thrust, but a horizontal sweep. The sword chi was like a gale. The violent sword chi suddenly split the space behind the Holy Sword. In the blink of an eye, a wall made of pure sword energy appeared behind the Holy Sword. The enchantress also appeared at the same time as the gale wall. She opened her arms, and with a burst of power, waves after waves of lightning rushed towards the Holy Sword. However, all the lightning was blocked by the gale wall behind the Holy Sword. The guest chamberlain of Jifeng Sword Raining School charged forward with his sword in hand. Sword light flashed, and with many afterimages, he directly stabbed at the back of the Holy Sword. The enchantress's figure flickered for a moment and suddenly disappeared. She reappeared where the halo of sword will was, in front of the Holy Sword. Her figure passed by the guest elder of the Jifeng Sword Raining School. The long whip once again appeared in Yao Ji's hand and coiled around the Holy Sword. Explode. Confine. In a very short time of confine, all the power in Yao Ji's body burst out in a vigorous way without reservation. The endless thunderbolts directly swallowed the Grand Knight of Knights Templars. Yao Ji's hysterical voice rang out again. You're all going to die. Chapter 1005. The battlefield was quickly divided into countless pieces. The goal of many experts on Mount Dibbing was extremely clear. They didn't deliberately deal with the elites of the 2 East Island superpowers who caused great trouble to Beihai. Everyone's target was the experts of the joint forces. A large number of ordinary elites were used as cannon fodder to delay North Sea's main forces, while the experts of the Allied forces lurked in the shadows to make North Sea bleed continuously. This was the Allied forces' strategy. This strategy was indeed successful. They had indeed brought great trouble to North Sea, and even caused unprecedented losses and failures. But with the intervention of Mount Dibbing, the whole situation was almost completely reversed in an instant. Every thunder-shocking realm expert in Mount Dibbing had his own area to be responsible for. The thunder-shocking realm expert in the air was looking for the elites of the joint forces. All Heaven's troops and internal defense troops on the ground were invincible. The whole situation was completely reversed in the most extreme speed and way, and the experts of the joint forces were constantly falling. Thunder and sword chi filled the sky of Lioli City. At this moment, dozens of thunder-shocking realm experts from the joint forces and the Wang family of Beihai were unleashing their powers. More than half of the city was completely illuminated by the seemingly endless lightning. Only the center of the city was silent amidst the boundless lightning. This was where the city hall was located. The moment the final battle broke out, this area was the first to fall. The Allied forces and the cannon fodder forces of East Island occupied the largest office building here and formed a temporary headquarters. It could be said that this was the place where the Allied forces were the strongest in Lioli City. There were 2 half-step invincible realm experts from Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace, and 1 half-step invincible realm expert from the Jiang family of South America. There were 3 at the peak of the Thunder-Shocking realm, 3 Thunder-Shocking realm experts, and more than 50 Fire-Flaming realm experts. Without the intervention of the high-level combat power of Mount Dibbing, this force could easily establish the situation of Lioli City at the most critical moment, and then rush directly to the floating island and Xingzhou with a large number of cannon fodder. This was the vanguard force that the Allied forces had invested in the entire North Sea battle. When the cannon fodder had been lost to a certain extent, they would directly take action and use the most decisive and cruel method to completely shatter the North Sea's will to resist. 3 in the half-step invincible realm, 3 in the peak of the Thunder-Shocking realm, and 3 in the Thunder-Shocking realm. As the true vanguard, these 9 high-ranking officials gathered in Lioli City could be said to be the cream of the crop among their peers, be it in terms of strength or physical condition. They had led the Allied forces across the Kanglan River, and could now be said to be the toughest bone to chew in the northern North Sea. So naturally, when the high-end combat power of Beihai entered the arena, what they were waiting for was the first position of the Wang family of Beihai on the surface. An expert. Killing, thunder, raging fire, flying snow. Dazzling lights and shadows flashed in all directions in the distance. The tall woman walked on the street without any expression. She didn't have any aura of a master, nor did she have any killing intent. She just walked forward quietly, but the elites of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace who stood in her way fell down one after another. They were not elites who had just joined the 2 forces. They were the real elites of the 2 superpowers in East Island. The wind and snow danced wildly in the block near the city hall. The wind and snow became bigger and bigger as the woman walked forward. From the beginning to the end, she didn't seem to make a move, but the elites in front of her kept falling down. When the first batch of elites who rushed to less than 10 meters in front of her suddenly fell to the ground, no one found anything wrong at all. The elites who had made up their minds to wash Beihai with blood rushed forward one after another, and then fell to the ground one after another. In just over 10 seconds, more than 100 elites had fallen in front of the woman. Everyone began to step back. But as the woman walked forward, more and more people fell down. No one had any wounds on their bodies, but the moment their bodies fell, they no longer had any vitality. An overwhelming snowstorm blanketed the entire street like a madman. The falling snow between heaven and earth seemed to start rotating slowly with the woman as the center. The snowflakes fell on the ground and floated in the air. When most of the city was covered by thunder and lightning, the sky and earth in the downtown area showed an extremely cold white. Who is this? In the temporary headquarters on the top floor of the office building, a dark-skinned, short man stood in front of the window and looked at the woman downstairs with solemn and serious eyes. The huge floor-to-ceiling window was almost completely covered by the wind and snow. Layers of white frost appeared on the window, and the figure of the woman also seemed extremely vague. I'm no match for her. Without any hesitation, the short, dark-skinned man told the truth frankly. It sounded shameful, but no one present would think he was a coward. The Jiang family of South America, which had a longer history than the Wang family of Beihai, had never had a coward among their conquerors. Janamalas the Conqueror. The leader of the conqueror troop of the Jiang family of South America, a top superior of the half-step invincible realm. Under the most frightening executioner sequence of the Jiang family of South America, the conqueror, the destroyer, and the slaughterer could be said to be the most important forces of the Jiang family of South America in the Dark World. Jiang Guochu was generous, wasn't he? Janamalas, the conqueror, put him here. It could be said that he spent a lot of money and was full of sincerity. Her code name is Phoenix, and her real name is Xia Huang. It is said that she is the younger sister of Summer Solstice. Next to Janamalas, the deputy palace master of Wuji Palace, who was also in the half-step invincible realm, Saber Ghost, looked a little pale. It hasn't been long since she returned to Beihai, and she hasn't made many moves. We can't find more information about her. In the past many years, she doesn't seem to exist in the Dark World. The only possibility is that she exists in the dark world in a different identity. All kinds of signs show that she seems to be the current top expert in Beihai, but no one can be sure of this. Can't you be sure now? Next to them, a woman with an extremely crazy and fierce aura pointed at the scene below. Doesn't this explain the problem? The woman took 2 steps forward, and the extremely fierce aura almost pierced the huge floor-to-ceiling window in front of her. Compared with Saber Ghost, the deputy palace master who ranked last in Wuji Palace, her status was obviously higher. In terms of real strength, her strength was even slightly better than that of Janamala's. She was now the only deputy sect master of Jifeng Sword Raining School. Her code name was Sword Soul, and she was only a step away from the real invincible realm. Did you see that just now? Sword Soul looked at the scene downstairs and asked in a low voice. Janamala's and Saber Ghost raised their eyebrows at the same time. I saw the fire. Sword Soul said in a low voice, but it disappeared very soon. With her voice, there was another burst of fire in the team of Jifeng Sword Raining School downstairs. The fire rolled up the wind and snow. It burned in an instant and then went out in an instant, as if it had never existed. The pupils of Janamala's and Saber Ghost suddenly contracted for a moment. This detail was not terrible. What was terrible was the other meaning that this detail represented. From a scientific point of view, Sword Soul's voice was flat and cold. Flames can't burn in a space without oxygen. At this time, downstairs, beside that woman, there should be a space that is infinitely close to a vacuum, so, before he finished speaking, Saber Ghost had already gasped. Domain? Only the domain of the invincible realm could really form a space that was infinitely close to a vacuum. There was no one who did not know about this matter. Sword Soul nodded and said gloomily, there's no need to discuss whether she is the current #1 expert in Beihai, but she must be a real invincible realm expert. And a very special invincible realm expert. Chapter 1006. Special Invincible Realm. This sentence was not difficult to understand in the Dark World, and it was even easier for the 3 half-step invincible realm experts of the joint forces. Before Phoenix, the king of Shadow in the Dark World, Situ Wanjia, who made the sanctuary suffer the heaviest loss in nearly 100 years, was a special invincible realm expert. He regarded the so-called 4 realms of martial arts as nothing. Experts who broke through to the invincible realm from a single realm were all special. Strictly speaking, the combat capability of such people might not be absolutely strong, but their exploration and excavation of a certain realm were constantly beyond the limit. Their knowledge and understanding of their own realm even surpassed that of experts at the peak of the invincible realm. Therefore, such people could often burst out incredible destructive power in a battle. The sky was full of wind and snow, and it was a world of ice and snow. White frost fluttered in the city center, filling up the sky and wreaking havoc in the city. Everywhere was covered in a cold silvery white color. The elites of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace kept retreating, and the formation was scattered. Finally, it turned into a large-scale escape. As Phoenix moved forward, more and more people fell down, and more people ran away. Obviously, this was a special person who broke through to the invincible realm from the ice-condensing realm. No. Janamalas frowned. She can't be regarded as a real invincible realm expert. Janamalas affirmed his speculation in a very certain tone. Instead of relaxing, his tone became more and more serious. She can be said to have the combat capability of the invincible realm. The key is the current temperature and environment. This environment can be said to be the home field of all ice-condensing realm experts. Now, even a real invincible realm expert may not be her opponent. Retreat? Without any hesitation, Saber Ghost said. Can we leave? Sword Soul's voice was extremely gloomy. We can leave, but what about the people below? What about the people outside? Give the order. All retreat, get out of Lioli City, back to the Queen's City, and even back to Kanglan City. Janamala said slowly, we must be clear that our people in Lioli City are no match for the high-end combat capability of Mount Dibbing at all. We are just the vanguard. Our goal is to attract the high-end combat capability of Mount Dibbing to enter, weaken the guard power of Mount Dibbing, and cause the greatest damage to Beihai before they appear. At present, I think we have done a very good job. But our target is not Lioli City. The Sword Soul said coldly. North Sea has gone mad. They stopped us here at all costs, and they've also suffered great losses. We didn't enter the battlefield we expected, but we've caused more damage to the enemy than we expected. Isn't that enough? Janamalas laughed. We should retreat. What else can we do? Fighting North Sea to the death with just the few of us here is equivalent to throwing our lives away. Remember who you are. We are just the vanguard. Some masters of the joint forces will follow His Majesty and the Royal Highnesses to set foot on Mount Dibbing, but these people are few. Most of them will stay in Kanglan to stabilize the situation there. We have a great advantage in Kanglan. Temporarily retreat to Kanglan, concentrate our forces, and eliminate all the high-end combat forces in North Sea. This is one of the most crucial plans in the final battle. Janamalas clenched his fists and shook his head. In the final battle of North Sea, the most important thing is not only Mount Dibbing, but also in Kanglan. We will concentrate our forces to kill all the high-end combat forces in North Sea, and then directly fight from Kanglan to Mount Dibbing to join the Royal Highnesses, making the Wang family of Beihai completely history. He looked at the Sword Soul and said word by word, in order to achieve this goal, some insignificant sacrifices are completely acceptable. Insignificant sacrifices? The Sword Soul stared at the conqueror of the Jiang family of South America with red eyes. Her palm pointed out of the window. This is an insignificant sacrifice. They knew very well how many people there were in the so-called vanguard, and they also knew how many of their people were in Lioli City at this time. In the face of the entrance of the high-end combat force of North Sea, if they ordered a retreat at this time, in such a situation, in a panic and without a command, it would be good if only 1/10 of these people could return to Kanglan City. This kind of sacrifice was hard to bear for Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace, and for the entire East Island. They are indeed great. Saber Ghost said blandly, but compared to the goal we have been pursuing for hundreds of years, they are insignificant. Not only them, as long as we can achieve the goal, we, even the two Highnesses, including Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace. Everyone is insignificant. We will remember them. If we can't leave here tonight, someone will remember us. The Sword Soul gritted her teeth and kept taking deep breaths. She seemed to want to say something, but in the end, she said nothing. In this final battle of North Sea, it was Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace, but it was not only them. In the few months before the final battle broke out, the strength of the two martial arts forces in East Island could be said to have skyrocketed. In just a few months, their comprehensive strength, including combatants, weapons and equipment, and economic power, suddenly increased by dozens of times. This kind of investment meant that they couldn't afford to lose, and it meant that the forces behind them couldn't afford to lose either. The more than 70,000 square kilometers of fertile land in the south of North Sea was the obsession that took root in the hearts of all of them for hundreds of years. This kind of obsession was passed down from generation to generation. Now that there was a chance, they had to seize it. They could lose, they could sacrifice, and they could even give up everything. But they just couldn't lose. Because they really couldn't afford to lose. If this final battle of North Sea ended with their failure, it could be said to be an unprecedented disaster for Jifeng Sword Raining School, for Wuji Palace, and for the entire East Island. This was not even a problem of shaking the foundation. If they didn't see the result they wanted in this big gamble, it would be a problem whether they could linger on in the future. Let's go. Janamalas narrowed his eyes and looked at the wind and snow outside the window. The wind and snow were howling. At the same time he made up his mind. Phoenix below raised her head and glanced at the conqueror at the same time. Through the night, through the wind and snow, they were dozens of meters apart. Crack. In the extremely clear cracking sound, all the windows of the municipal building, which was more than 10 stories high, suddenly shattered. The cold wind and snow instantly blew into the building. All the warmth completely disappeared. In the temporary command room, the temperature dropped by dozens of degrees the moment the windows were broken. Bang! All the teacups, bottles, cans, and kettles in the command room froze at the same time and then exploded. The temperature kept dropping, and endless icy wind blew in. The conqueror of the Jiang family of South America, the deputy palace master of Wuji Palace, the deputy suzerain of Jifeng Sword Reigning School. There were also 6 other superiors of the thunder-shocking realm. Everyone trembled slightly in the cold wind. Not because of fear or scruples. Just because of the cold. It was an almost instinctive physiological reaction. Phoenix stepped in the air, and her body was getting higher and higher. There seemed to be an invisible staircase in the air, dragging her up constantly. The wind and snow were dancing wildly in the sky. Every snowflake seemed to become an extremely sharp sword. The fluttering snowflakes fell in her domain and flew out with her power. Phoenix's domain was getting bigger and bigger, squeezing the sky above Lioli City. Thunder was still roaring and spreading in all directions, but no electric arc could get close to the wind and snow in the air. It was winter in North Sea. The lowest temperature in the early morning. Everyone was facing the wind and snow that had been roaring and raging in North Sea for several days. What was the home advantage? To Phoenix, all of this was a true home ground advantage. She was not the top expert of the half-step invincible realm. Strictly speaking, she was in the ice-condensing realm, which was infinitely close to the invincible realm. All the combat capability she possessed was constantly breaking the limit in the domain of the ice-condensing realm. So this home advantage allowed her to break through her bottleneck easily and temporarily in this environment. At this moment, in this wind and snow, it could be said that Phoenix was at the peak of her life. Endless snowflakes gathered crazily around her and neatly arranged themselves. Phoenix's figure was getting higher and higher, gradually approaching the command room in the building. The snowflakes all over the sky surrounded her, forming a vast white disk. In the command room, 9 superiors of the thunder-shocking realm and above had gathered together. Countless blue electric arcs flashed around them. Everyone gathered together and slowly retreated. Slowly retreated. The boundless cold wind and snow seemed to freeze everything, and even their movements became extremely difficult. Phoenix's tall figure came up from the ground. Through the broken window, she was level with the 9 superiors in the command room. The boundless snow disk almost completely swallowed her figure. Vaguely, Janamalas the Conqueror saw Phoenix open her hands. He opened his mouth to say something, but the rapidly dropping temperature and the cold wind poured directly into his throat the moment he opened his mouth. His face turned red, and he trembled and coughed wildly. Boom! The moment the first cough sounded, Phoenix's hands were completely open. Embracing the night, embracing the wind and snow. Destroying heaven and earth. The densely packed disc-shaped snowflakes around her suddenly exploded. The once bustling city seemed to usher in a huge avalanche without warning. The wind and snow were as sharp as knives. The flying snow seemed to have become a part of Phoenix's body. They flew everywhere, tearing everything around them. Streets, people, buildings, trees, gardens, street lamps. The wind and snow were mighty. The violent sound was earth-shattering. It seemed that the whole world was collapsing. The temperature dropped crazily. The flying wind and snow froze everything. This was Phoenix's strongest blow using the home advantage. She directly blew up her domain. Exploring the power of the invincible realm with the ice-condensing realm, her domain had the most distinctive feature of the ice-condensing realm. That was absolute coldness. The temperature dropped crazily, and in the shortest time, it reached a horrifying low temperature of nearly 100 degrees below zero. Under the snow explosion, all the elites of Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace were completely buried by the collapsed snowflakes and buildings. Under such conditions, almost no so-called elites could survive. The snowflakes gradually fell to the ground. The extreme coldness was still spreading silently in the ruins. Phoenix stood in the air, slightly lowered her head, and narrowed her eyes. In her sight, the blue electric arcs collapsed countless snow and large pieces of ice, and one figure after another appeared in front of her. It was still the 9 superiors with high-level combat capability. With the 3 superiors of the half-step invincible realm as the core, everyone joined hands to block Phoenix's outbreak. In addition to Phoenix, in the nearby large area, these 9 superiors were the last survivors of the snow explosion. Phoenix's face was indifferent, without sadness or joy. She had never liked Beihai, so she was not moved by the so-called miserable situation in front of her. She came to Beihai only because of her sister's request, that was all. The enemy in front of her was not dead, so she could kill him again. Even if she couldn't kill him, it didn't matter. Just try your best. Endless snow and wind surged toward her body again. Phoenix's eyes seemed to turn into snow, pure white, extremely pure and focused. "Bitch, how dare you!" A seemingly mad shout suddenly came from below. A thunder-shocking realm expert of Jifeng sword raining school was so angry that he was about to rush out and fight with Phoenix. The snow explosion caused by Phoenix just now buried all the elites of Jifeng sword raining school and Wuji Palace, including all his direct subordinates. Under the attack of extreme anger, he seemed to have completely lost his mind. A dazzling thunderbolt suddenly bloomed in his hand, and then went out in an instant. It was a world of ice and snow, endless coldness. Phoenix glanced at him. Puff. In the dull sound, the bodies of the 3 thunder-shocking realm experts who had not yet reached the peak of the thunder-shocking realm suddenly exploded, but there was no splashing blood. All the blood in the 3 people's bodies was completely frozen into ice cubes, and the broken bodies completely became frozen meat, falling to the ground piece by piece. Retreat. Retreat now. The 3 superiors of the half-step invincible realm felt their scalps go numb. They didn't know enough about Phoenix, but under such unique conditions, the extreme strength that Phoenix exerted was not at the invincible realm, but close to the peak of the invincible realm. This kind of special superior who only pursued a single realm, once he grew up, was enough to make anyone feel tricky. The 3 superiors of the half-step invincible realm and the 3 superiors of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm turned around at the same time. Expressionless, Phoenix crooked her finger at them. The wind and snow between heaven and earth froze in an instant. The bodies of the 3 superiors of the half-step invincible realm suddenly stiffened for a moment, and they almost fell into the snow. Blood gushed out of their mouths, and instantly froze into ice. Their speed of escape suddenly slowed down countless times. The bodies of the 3 superiors at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm behind them were completely frozen where they were. As Phoenix moved her finger, all the blood in their bodies rushed out of their eyes, nostrils, ears, and mouths. The blood left their bodies and froze instantly, falling to the ground. All the blood in the 3 superiors at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm was sucked out in an instant, and their bodies completely shriveled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Phoenix's figure slowly floated forward in the wind and snow for a while. She finally opened her mouth and said the first words since she stepped into the battlefield. "You can't run away." Facing the 3 superiors of the half-step invincible realm, she slowly moved her palm forward. The wind and snow in all directions were like dragons, roaring and rising into the sky, filling the night sky. Phoenix's palm slowly pressed forward. But nothing happened. The roar of the helicopter came from far away in the sky. From south to north, it flew over the sky of Lioli City. Countless wind and snow froze in the air in an instant. An extremely obscure domain directly shrouded from the inside of the helicopter, instantly controlling the wind and snow in Phoenix's hand. Endless heavy snow swirled, squeezed together, and directly smashed toward Phoenix. Phoenix's expression changed slightly. Before her body could react, the endless snowflakes had already slammed into her body. Bang! In the dull sound, Phoenix's body was directly slapped away for dozens of meters, and a large amount of blood flowed down from all over her body. This power, Conqueror, Saber Ghost, and Sword Soul were ecstatic. They subconsciously bowed in the direction of the helicopter and said loudly, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The helicopter did not stop at all, and did not even care about Phoenix's life or death. It flew over Lioli City at full speed. On the helicopter, several superiors of the Invincible Realm and more than a dozen superiors of the Half-Step Invincible Realm were silent all the way. When the high-end combat capability of Mount Dibbing entered the battlefield to fight back against Kanglin's sect, the strongest combat capability of the joint forces also left Kanglin's sect. They went straight to Mount Dibbing. Chapter 1007. Even when most of the high-end combat power had left Xingzhou, the defense of Mount Dibbing could still be described as terrifying. This was the headquarters of the Wang family of Beihai, which had been developed for hundreds of years. In the past hundreds of years, it seemed that since the establishment of the Wang family of Beihai, no one had been able to reach the foot of Mount Dibbing. This behemoth, which had always stood at the peak of the Dark World, had always blocked all the battles outside Beihai. Naturally, no one could really see the fangs of Mount Dibbing. Now Chen Fangqing had crossed the bottom line. Under the pressure of internal strength and external pressure, Mount Dibbing had completely become an indestructible war fortress. Li Tianlan had heard from Li Honghe a long time ago that the old man had evaluated Mount Dibbing as the safest place in the world. Although the old man had not explicitly said some weapons and facilities, he had bluntly said that there was a very powerful firepower configuration on Mount Dibbing. The most important thing was that these firepower configurations were updated and fine-tuned almost every year. Today, this was the first time that Li Tianlan had seen such a complete Mount Dibbing. More than 2 years ago, when he swept across Beihai, Mount Dibbing was quiet. At about the same time, when the peerless expert who left a private plane and suddenly disappeared split Mount Dibbing with a sword, perhaps the sword was too fast, so Mount Dibbing was still quiet. Until today, until tonight, until now. Li Tianlan had thoroughly seen the true face of Mount Dibbing. On and under the mountain. 7 sets of automatic weapon systems. 12 sets of semi-automatic weapon systems. 9 lines of defense. More than 2,000 weapon terminals. 2 sets of alternating scanning systems. Hundreds of monitoring radars. A military low-altitude satellite. The dense firepower with no blind spots could guarantee to cover every corner of Mount Dibbing at any time. This so-called every corner even included the Emperor Palace, where the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai lived. There were no blind spots, so there were no weaknesses. When all the weapons of Mount Dibbing were fully activated, with sufficient ammunition, it was an indestructible fortress that could even withstand the frontal attack of hundreds of thousands of troops. This war fortress could no longer be described as terrifying. Its unimaginably powerful firepower had reached a crazy level. Even as strong as Li Tianlan was, he felt suffocated when he saw this. In this state, once Mount Dibbing opened fire, Li Tianlan was not sure how long he could hold on. With Ruthless, he could ensure that he could retreat. But what if Ruthless ran out of energy? Floating alone in the air, Li Tianlan squinted and looked down at the clear Mount Dibbing. Vaguely, he seemed to understand the meaning of the Wang family of Beihai. He was standing there. Mount Dibbing showed all the defense systems, not only to deal with the enemy, but also to deter allies. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and looked down at Wang Xingxiao. The people in the sky were looking down on the ground. The people on the ground were looking at the sky. Beside Wang Xingxiao, a middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses kept saying something. His voice was not loud, but his clear and steady voice directly reached Li Tianlan's ears. Patriarch, we have completed the final inspection of all the weapon systems. The ammunition is sufficient, the system is stable, and the weapons are in good condition. We can officially put them to use at any time. Have you checked the personnel? Wang Xingxiao nodded and asked slowly. Don't worry, everyone's loyalty is guaranteed. The middle-aged man adjusted his glasses and smiled. If you don't trust me, you can give the control authority to others. We will obey all the arrangements of Mount Dibbing. My assistant can also cooperate with all your orders. Uncle, you're being too serious. Wang Xingxiao laughed. He stretched out his hand and patted the middle-aged man on the shoulder. His voice was sincere. I have enough trust in you, uncle. My father once told me that maybe one day, the whole world will betray the Wang family of Beihai. But even in a real desperate situation, there are people we can trust. You are one of them. The middle-aged man smiled. He was a little relieved, a little emotional, and a little sad. Tianzong, he shook his head and let out a long sigh. Wu Qingwu, a senior researcher and honorary president of the Zhongzhou Academy of Military Sciences, the president of the Beihai Academy of Military Sciences, and the chief weapon researcher of Mount Dibing. This was a name that might not be known by others, but it was definitely well known in certain fields. In the past 2 decades, in the entire Zhongzhou state, in the field of weapon development, only Dongqing Wujin of the Dongqing clan could be compared with Wu Qingwu in various honors, achievements, and academic status. Wu Qingwu was from Wuyue in Zhongzhou state. 15 years ago, in order to invite him to Beihai, Wang Tianzong, the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, made 3 visits to the thatched cottage before he finally succeeded. Compared with Dongqing Wujin, who focused on individual combat unit equipment and heavy armor, he might be a little worse than Dongqing Wujin in these 2 fields, but his professional ability was extremely good. Several weapon systems on Mount Dibing, various armaments in the Beihai Corps, and countless large weapons on the sea, land, and air were shining with the sparks of his wisdom. Beihai had a deep foundation, but in the past 2 decades, their military power had been at the top of the world. It could be said that Wu Qingwu's contribution was indispensable. In the entire Mount Dibing, Wu Qingwu was the only person who could make Wang Tianzong call him Brother Wu. He was one of Wang Tianzong's best friends. As far as Wu Qingwu was concerned, Wang Tianzong was his only friend. His loyalty and position did not need to be emphasized at all. As Wang Tianzong said, even if the world betrayed the Wang family of Beihai, Wu Qingwu was definitely one of the few people who stood by the Wang family of Beihai. He shook his head and took out a cigarette from his pocket. Before he could light it, his fingers suddenly moved. The sword energy moved slightly. The cigarette in his hand rushed into the sky and fell into Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan flicked his fingers, lit the cigarette, and took a deep breath. Wu Qingwu froze for a while, coughed, took out another cigarette, and lit it. His voice was clearer than before. It's okay. Even if Tianzong is not here, Mount Dibing is still Mount Dibing. Anyone who dares to attack here will pay a heavy price. Wang Xingxiao nodded and said yes. Wu Qingwu looked up at Li Tianlan. There was some fear and dissatisfaction in his eyes. After this incident, all the weapon systems in Mount Dibing will be greatly adjusted, so that His Majesty standing in the sky will not think that he knows Mount Dibing like the back of his hand. He will sweep it again when he is in a bad mood. Li Tianlan stood in the sky, smoking and looking down at Wu Qingwu. Wu Qingwu stared back at him without flinching. It's okay. Wang Xingxiao shook his head and said with a smile, our development model is almost the same as that of Emperor Dong's palace, and we also have the same development ideas and development paths. This means that we will never be allies who share life and death with each other, but it also means that we will not become sworn enemies. Wu Qingwu snorted and took a deep breath of the cigarette. He said in a muffled voice, I hope so. Li Tianlan did not speak. After coming to Mount Dibing and talking with Wang Xingxiao for a while, he left the stage a formidable person and stood in the air, refusing to communicate with anyone. He was silent as if he did not exist. Wu Qingwu threw the cigarette in his hand to the ground, shook his head to shake off the snowflakes on his head, and said slowly, Patriarch, do you have anything else to say? No. Wang Xingxiao said with an easygoing smile, Uncle, I am very relieved. Then I will go to prepare. Wu Qingwu nodded and turned to leave. Most of the high-end combat force on Mount Dibing had left Xingzhou to fight back against Kanglan. In an unprecedented state of weakness, although they had Li Tianlan now, Wu Qingwu, who could easily control all the weapons on Mount Dibing, was the most important figure in this battle before Li Tianlan took action. He would enter the underground base of Mount Dibing, and then enter a sealed space of about dozens of square meters, controlling all the weapons on Mount Dibing to crush everything. In that small space, he was absolutely safe. But it also meant that as long as he entered that sealed space, no matter he fired at the joint forces or Wang Xingxiao, no one could do anything to him. Under such circumstances, Wang Xingxiao gave Wu Qingwu the highest level of trust. His cell phone rang. Wang Xingxiao took out his phone and glanced at the message on the screen. He narrowed his eyes. He took one last look at Wu Qingwu's back. In a flash, he walked to the air and stood beside Li Tianlan. They are coming. With a gloomy expression, Wang Xingxiao said slowly. The wind and snow were drifting between heaven and earth. Li Tianlan looked down at his watch. It was 5:00 in the morning. The night was long in winter. At this moment, there were about 2 hours before dawn. It's almost time for them to take action. Li Tianlan nodded, not surprised. Where are they? 20 minutes ago, they passed by Lioli City and saved 3 experts of the half-step invincible realm from my aunt. The 3 people did not return to Kanglan. Instead, they followed the joint forces to Mount Dibbing. They delayed in Lioli City for some time, and now they are close to the floating island. Wang Xingxiao said blandly. The 3 experts of the half-step invincible realm have to be followed. Their high-end power seems to be just as so-so. Li Tianlan shook his head. Is Kanglan sure to get them back? It's very difficult. Wang Xingxiao said calmly, there is no specific information at present, but the most important thing is that they have too many people. Our victory or defeat here is directly related to whether we can get Kanglan back. Before there is a specific result here, the best result for Kanglan is a stalemate. Now our people have arrived at Queen City. The next step is to cross the river and fight. Li Tianlan fell silent and did not speak. His eyes fell on Wu Qingwu, who had gradually walked far away. You trust him a lot? Li Tianlan suddenly said. Of course. Wang Xingxiao nodded without hesitation. In the current situation, Uncle Wu is one of the people I trust most. He suddenly frowned. Do you suspect him? No. Li Tianlan shook his head and said blandly, but in this case, many examples show one thing. The more trustworthy a person is, the more likely he is to betray. You think too much. Wang Xingxiao couldn't help laughing. Li Tianlan didn't say much, just gave a faint Chapter 1008. Wang Xingxiao didn't talk much about this topic. Wu Qingwu's loyalty and position were issues that the people of Beihai didn't need to consider. In his extremely sensitive position, if he didn't have enough loyalty, Mount Dibbing would have been riddled with holes over the years. For so many years, Mount Dibbing had always been impregnable, which could fully prove Wu Qingwu's loyalty. In the wind and snow, Wang Xingxiao reached out and caught a snowflake falling from the sky. In the deep cold night, his tone was a little strange. You fought with Jiang Shangyu a few hours ago. Do you think his defense can withstand the firepower on Mount Dibbing? Li Tianlan glanced at him. Wang Xingxiao's expression was a little complicated. It was a feeling that was hard to specify. Jiang Shangyu. This name caused more waves in the dark world tonight than the outbreak of the final battle in Beihai. Most of the time of his battle with Li Tianlan was in the dark domain. Emperor Dong's palace was not obliged to publicize Jiang Shangyu's identity. But when Jiang Shangyu came to Beihai from Tiannan, the figure that had been shrouded in starlight and clouds showed its true face for the first time. There was no disguise at all. There was no need for any disguise. Jiang Shangyu. He surpassed the peak of the invincible realm and was a domain-type master who stood at the highest point in the dark world for hundreds of years. His Majesty, who had been hiding in the dark. The 3 identities brought a huge impact to the dark world. Everyone couldn't come back to their senses. As for Wang Xingxiao, the impact gradually turned into a strong bitterness and unwillingness after the initial shock. In the past 2 years, it was the time when the Wang family of Beihai needed strength the most. In particular, the lack of high-end combat capability made countless forces in the dark world restless. Wang Xingxiao had worked very hard. Under great pressure, he was making progress almost every day. A 27-year-old half-step invincible realm expert was extremely rare, not to mention now, even in the past decades or hundreds of years. But when he worked hard, Li Tianlan had become Donghuang. He was the chosen one and could be regarded as an exception. Then Jiang Shangyu also became His Majesty, who surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. What about him? What was he, the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Xingxiao's mentality had indeed been severely affected, but the rapid outbreak of the decisive battle in North Sea had successfully diverted his attention. But this did not mean that he could forget this matter. At this time, when this name was mentioned again, Wang Xingxiao's heart was really a little complicated. It couldn't be said to be jealousy or envy. All sorts of emotions were suppressed in his heart, and in the end, it turned into a faint but piercing unwillingness. I don't know. Li Tianlan said faintly, most of the weapons on Mount Dibing are secret weapons developed by the Wang family of Beihai in recent years. Without specific firepower parameters and examples, how can I answer you? What if it's you? Wang Xingxiao frowned and said, if it's more powerful than conventional weapons, then, it's meaningless. Li Tianlan said calmly, I may not be able to withstand the firepower on Mount Dibing, but if you are on the mountain and you and I are your enemy, it is not difficult for me to kill you and escape. It's impossible for Jiang Shangyu to come here without knowing the defense on Mount Dibing. But I don't think he will be so stupid as to use his body to resist the firepower on Mount Dibing when facing me. So, in this respect, he put his hope on East Island? Wang Xingxiao laughed. He looked at Li Tianlan deeply and said softly, there seems to be some problems in East Island. This was undoubtedly the weirdest problem since the final battle. The elites of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Limitless Palace who were fighting each other didn't know. Because in their consciousness, all the communication was perfectly normal. Every ordinary elite, from squad leader to squadron leader to commander, every communication was very smooth. Every communication was very normal, and every order seemed to be logical. Beihai didn't know what was going on, but the most realistic situation was that all the fleets of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace had left Beihai and entered Liaodong, Zhongzhou State. The Black Dragon Army of the Border Control Corps sent by Dongqing Wudi had taken over the ownership of the fleet an hour ago. Because the staff in the fleet either surrendered on the spot or were killed directly. The greatest firepower advantage of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace had been completely ruined. But the most shocking thing was that the elites of the joint forces acted as if they didn't know what had happened. The whole world was dumbfounded and didn't know what was going on. Some intelligence systems of Beihai were in full operation. All kinds of intelligence showed that from a few hours ago to now, countless communications were trying to get in touch with East Island, including Chen Fangqing's encrypted phone. But all the communications were blocked. Phone, internet, satellite, everything. The whole East Island seemed to be completely out of touch with the whole world. Mount Dibing's extremely powerful defense system wasn't exposed, but it wasn't a secret. Just like Li Tianlan said, Jiang Shangyu wouldn't be stupid enough to use his body and domain to resist the artillery fire when facing Li Tianlan. So his only hope was East Island. Even if Chen Fangqing was crazy, he wouldn't let his own force attack Beihai. East Island was the only candidate to suppress the firepower of Mount Dibing for a short time. But now East Island was out of touch. All the elites of the joint forces were going to face Mount Dibing, which had no high-end combat capability but could cover the sky and the earth in terms of firepower. What was a surprise? Wang Xingxiao suddenly had some expectations. When they show up here, I really want to see their faces. Wang Xingxiao smiled leisurely. Jiang Shangyu is not a fool. Li Tianlan said blandly, he might not know that East Island had a problem before, but I didn't hide anything when I passed by Kanglan. Even if he couldn't see it, when he passed by Floating Island and Xingzhou, he would feel that something was wrong. But he still dared to come, which is enough to explain the problem. Wang Xingxiao frowned and seemed to be thinking about something. What do you think the problem is? Li Tianlan continued to ask. Wang Xingxiao was silent for a long time, and then slowly said, I don't know. There are two possibilities. Li Tianlan thought of the conversation with Qin Weibai and Xianyuan Wushang, who suddenly joined Emperor Dong's palace. He narrowed his eyes. The other party temporarily controlled all the communication networks of East Island. The word temporarily was the key. First, Jiang Shangyu has got in touch with East Island, and the authority to communicate and control weapons has been restored in East Island. At least, he and East Island both think that before he comes to Mount Dibbing, the abnormality inside East Island can return to normal. Second, Li Tianlan looked at him and said, there are loopholes in the defense system of Mount Dibbing, and they are loopholes that you have all ignored. That's impossible. Wang Xingxiao shook his head. Don't jump to conclusions. Li Tianlan said blandly, today, it's not only Jiang Shangyu's joint forces who want to destroy Mount Dibbing, but also your second uncle. Do you think he knows something? Chapter 1009. When the helicopter flew over Xingzhou, the brightly lit floating island city had become very quiet. The lights were shining, and the traffic was surging. The helicopter flew at a low altitude. Every major traffic road in Xingzhou was guarded by the elites of the Beihai Corps. The atmosphere might be more tense than usual, but in general, everything in Xingzhou still belonged to Beihai. People's lives in Xingzhou didn't seem to be affected at all. Seeing this scene, no matter how good Jiang Shangyu's self-restraint was, his face became a little gloomy at this time. They set off from Kanglan City and passed by Queen City and Liuli City. What they saw in front of them could barely be regarded as the expected scene. Chaos was spreading, flames were burning, people were panicking, smoke was rising everywhere, order was collapsing, and it was a mess. This was the scene he expected, and it was also the scene in line with the plan. But when they passed by Liuli City and arrived at the floating island, everything suddenly changed. Liuli City had been stabilized. The Beihai Corps had begun to restore order. The combatants were withdrawing from the war zone. All departments of Beihai were cleaning the scene. Order in all aspects of the floating island was being restored. Then they arrived at Xingzhou. Xingzhou was just a place with more patrols of the Beihai Corps. Xingzhou was a place with lights, singing, and dancing. It was as if nothing had happened. Looking at this scene, Jiang Shangyu couldn't even be sure if there had been chaos in Xingzhou before. He squinted, and he became a little annoyed. He still lost contact with East Island, and he couldn't get any information. It seemed that everything had been out of control. What was certain was that East Island's firepower still hadn't recovered. This operation was very important for Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace. With this opportunity, East Island completely bet on the future, without leaving any leeway. But as soon as they sat at the table, all their trump cards were revealed, and the funny thing was that they didn't know it. In the original plan, Zhongzhou State had Chen Fangqing's cooperation, and all the firepower of East Island would be unreservedly fired. If nothing went wrong, the scene in Queen City should be the scene in Xingzhou now. Now there was no strong firepower support. Not to mention what it meant, at least, the Beihai Corps of Xingzhou had the possibility to support Mount Dibbing. Uneasiness was brewing in his heart. Jiang Shangyu actually had some thoughts in his heart, but he couldn't say them and didn't want to say them. This was indeed the best opportunity. For the Wang family of Beihai and Li Tianlan, there was indeed an indelible hatred in his heart. Along with hatred, there was also ambition. Right now, everything was indeed the best opportunity. Because of Chen Fangqing, Wang Xiaoyao, and Wang Qinglei, the Wang family of Beihai, which used to be strong and indestructible, had a very deep crack. If he didn't seize this opportunity, Jiang Shangyu was not sure if he could turn the tables in the future. This was indeed the best opportunity, but it was also the least successful operation. This was not the first time he had thought of leaving early in this kind of situation. As long as there was no danger to his life, then this operation could not be considered a failure. But in the end, it was just a thought. He could not say it out loud, nor could he do it. Yagyu Kurumi was now his disciple. He was cooperating with Jifeng Sword Raining School, Wuji Palace, Liquangtu, the Sanctuary, and the Jiang family of South America. This was the first large-scale operation since the formation of the United Forces. The rudiment of the dynasty had been built. Jiang Shangyu couldn't let it go, and he didn't dare to let it go. He could lose the battle with Li Tianlan, but he couldn't retreat at this time. If he retreated at this time, not only would he break with Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace, but it would also leave a foundation of distrust for other partners. At this time, the United Forces and many second-class forces from the Dark World came to watch. If Jiang Shangyu retreated at this time, it was almost equivalent to becoming the enemy of the entire Dark World. In this way, even if he could survive, when the final battle ended, Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai would, how could they let go of this opportunity? At that time, the Jiang family would be even more miserable than the Jiang family in his memory. We will arrive at Mount Dibing in 15 minutes. Thinking silently, Jiang Shangyu said with a poker face, "Everyone, is there anything else you want to say?" In the cabin, Moraid subconsciously looked at his watch. It was 5:30 in the morning in Beihai, which was full of wind and snow. The night was still dark, as if it could swallow everything. East Island's professionalism in network security is really impressive. In the corner, Wang Xiaoyao glanced at Yagyu Kurumi and Tianhai Wuji, and his voice was cold. "Are you sure it's our problem?" Yagyu Kurumi didn't speak, but Tianhai Wuji looked straight into Wang Xiaoyao's eyes with sharp eyes. "Otherwise? Isn't the situation in front of you already explained everything? There is no way to restore communication after such a long time, and even the control authority of weapons has been lost. No matter who wins or loses in this final battle, you will become the laughing stock of the world. If you didn't drag us down, the current situation would be 10,000 times better." Wang Xiaoyao taunted mercilessly. He, Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace were indeed allies at this time. But this cooperation plan didn't mean that Wang Xiaoyao would like it. Once Mount Dibing was completely destroyed, Wang Xiaoyao would become the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. As a condition, half of the territory of the 3 cities in the south of Beihai would return to East Island. Wang Xiaoyao certainly didn't want to see this happen, but it was not unacceptable. His position determined his head. So once he became the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, the cooperation at this time was equivalent to automatically ending. After Wang Xiaoyao got the position he wanted, he would desperately take back nearly half of the land that East Island had taken. At that time, the two sides would change from allies to enemies. Everyone knew this, so there was no need to be polite at this time. But no matter what happened in the future, specifically tonight, the two sides had the same goal. What East Island did in the trial with the Allied forces was really shocking. When they set off from Kanglan province, no one took it seriously. Everyone thought that East Island would soon restore communication and take back the control authority of weapons. But until now, when they were about to arrive at Mount Dibing, they still lost contact with East Island. Xingzhou and Liuli were already calm, but East Island still didn't know anything. What the hell were they doing? Even if someone used virtual intelligence to replace communication, it couldn't be flawless. Did those people really not notice anything? Wang Xiaoyao took a serious look at Tianhai Wuji and Yagyu Kurasumi. At the beginning, he even thought that East Island was going to play a trick in this final battle, but now it turned out that East Island was really King Noob. Were their technicians all stupid pigs? Enough. Jiang Shangyu suddenly said, "It's meaningless to say this now. We have come to this point, and we have no way back. Move forward and trample Mount Dibing, or we will be crushed by Mount Dibing. That's our only choice now. But we don't have strong firepower support now." Jiang Guochu's tone was a little complicated. In terms of personal force, they were undoubtedly the few people who stood at the peak level in the Dark World. But the peak of personal force didn't mean that they were omnipotent. When countless modern weapons exceeded a certain scale, even the peak of personal force couldn't withstand a moment of concentrated fire. It was not an exaggeration to say that they lost half of their strength when they lost contact with East Island. Jiang Guochu had been a little uneasy, and he even wanted to leave in advance more than once. But the Jiang family of South America had paid too much for this final battle. If he left at this time, not only would he lose everything, but he would also lose contact with Jiang Shanyu. Then the previous plan of destroying the allied forces of Beihai and helping him control America would naturally be ruined. Among the several Invincible Realm experts, his mind was undoubtedly the most indecisive. Wang Xiaoyao clearly wanted the position of patriarch. At this time, he had no other choice but to stand with the allied forces. No matter what, he had to move forward. Otherwise, he would end up with nothing. Not to mention the two from East Island. If they left at this time, they would end up worse than Wang Xiaoyao. As for Moraid, he was completely a loyal dog beside Jiang Shanyu. He didn't have so many messy thoughts at all. In addition, there was Li Guangtu, who was not on the plane now. No one knew where he was, even Jiang Shanyu didn't know where he was. Accidents are always out of control. Jiang Shanyu shook his head and looked at Wang Xiaoyao. What do you want to add? Wang Xiaoyao glanced at Tianhai Wuji, who had been looking at him, shook his head slightly, and said lightly, nothing. Everyone froze for a moment. Jiang Shanyu narrowed his eyes and tentatively said, Mount Dibbing? Nothing. Wang Xiaoyao repeated the sentence again. Jiang Shanyu laughed. This is really a surprise. Surprises are all mutual. Wang Xiaoyao's voice was calm. They can surprise us, so I can also surprise them. What was a surprise? What? It was King amazing. Surprise. Wang Xiaoyao's voice was very soft, but with his voice, everyone's eyes lit up. Jiang Shanyu looked ahead. In the night, the sky was full of wind and snow, and the outline of Mount Dibbing was looming. Jiang Shanyu let out a long breath and said with great pride, Today, we will, whoosh. Before his voice died away, the wind and snow all over the sky suddenly froze. In the distance ahead, the sharp sword light that seemed to tear everything suddenly shone in the night sky, stabbing directly at the helicopter where Jiang Shanyu was. Jiang Shanyu raised his eyebrows and instantly released his domain. The condensed domain completely blocked the sword light. The helicopter moved forward slowly. In reality, another helicopter appeared in the distance. One was from south to north, and the other was from north to south. At the moment when they were facing each other, the sword light surged like a tide. The door of the opposite helicopter opened. A woman who looked extremely stiff slowly walked out of the cabin. Her body paused in the air for a moment. In an instant, the woman's aura began to soar wildly. In the blink of an eye, she broke through the invincible realm, and the powerful aura became more and more terrifying. The woman's long hair fluttered in the wind and snow. She stood in the air. In the sky and on the ground, there was sword light everywhere. Moraid, who was the closest to the peak of the invincible realm in the dark world, immediately became extremely serious. Everyone recognized this woman. This woman should have appeared in Mount Dibbing, but at this time, she passed by Mount Dibbing and appeared here to stop several invincible realm experts. The Queen of Darkness. Flaming Fire. The Master of Samsara Palace. Moon-gazing Song. Vaguely, Mount Dibbing in the distance was shaking slowly. A few kilometers away from Mount Dibbing, Moon-gazing Song stood in the air, and the sword light was mighty. Your Majesty, you go to Mount Dibbing, and I will solve the incantation. Moraid slowly opened his mouth, and his voice was extremely dry. Everyone could hear the guilt in his tone. Jiang Shanyu narrowed his eyes. He was about to face Li Tianlan and even Li Guangtu. It was really inappropriate for him to take action at this time. He had to ensure that he was always in his peak state to face the strongest enemy. But Moraid, he looked at Moon-gazing Song and shook his head subconsciously. Let me do it. A calm voice suddenly rang out, calm and indifferent. Wang Xiaoyao stood up from his seat and looked calm. You go to Mount Dibbing, and leave her to me. Everyone subconsciously raised their heads and looked at Wang Xiaoyao. Jiang Shanyu turned around and stared deeply at Wang Xiaoyao's face. After a while, he opened his mouth and laughed. Ha! He shook his head hard and whispered, "The Wang family of Beihai." Chapter 10:10. There was no sound in the cabin. The roaring sound of the helicopter rotors was completely isolated by the domain, so Jiang Shanyu's sigh seemed particularly deep and long. Wang Xiaoyao didn't respond clearly. He just looked at Jiang Shanyu and suddenly said with a smile, "Don't you trust me?" Several Invincible Realm experts hadn't come to their senses yet. When they heard this, their hearts subconsciously tightened. Whether they could trust Wang Xiaoyao or not was a very serious question. Because of the seriousness, they secretly tested him many times from different angles, and they got the results they wanted and let go of their doubts. But this situation was too sensitive. Mount Dibbing was more than a mountain. It was the headquarters of the Wang family of Beihai, the nest of Beihai, and their ultimate goal. When they lost contact with East Island and had no strong firepower support, it was understandable that they would encounter any degree of firepower suppression in Mount Dibbing. Wang Xiaoyao stayed here to face Meng Xiang'e, which meant that Wang Xiaoyao was out of the final battlefield of the final battle. If this was a trap, Wang Xiaoyao, the person who set up the trap, would remove himself at the last and most critical moment, and they would bear all the dangers alone. If this was really a trap, it would take more than 2 years. With the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai, it could totally create a trap that could completely destroy them. Believe it or not. You can doubt me. Wang Xiaoyao said slowly. His whole aura was changing little by little, from the original calm and indifference to a kind of indomitable sharpness and aggressiveness. The premise is that you can stop this woman. Outside the cabin, Meng Xiang'e's aura was getting more and more terrifying. From the initial stiffness, she became flexible and strong. Her state seemed to have completely recovered to the peak in the shortest time. The violent sword energy spread out layer by layer with her body as the center, and the space was distorted visibly. The fluttering snowflakes were directly torn into pieces by the sword energy the moment they got close to her. This kind of kendo was fierce and crazy, as if it deliberately and easily tore everything in the world, including the sky and the earth. This was the 24 moves of Sword of the Li family. This was Meng Xiang'e, who had really put most of her body into the domain of the peak of the Invincible Realm. It was a choice that was not surprising at all. Jiang Shanyu narrowed his eyes and looked at the figure in the distant sky. Qin Weibai was the real Gu Xianyan who accompanied Dongqing Huangtu. As Qin Weibai's most trusted confidant, Munjiu and Song naturally followed the path that Dongqing Huangtu had taken. She might not have the absolutely perfect sword intent, nor could she see the so-called end of martial arts, but she was absolutely no stranger to the 24 moves of sword. For hundreds of years, the Li family's sword was the sharpest and craziest sword in the dark world. A super powerful opponent who was infinitely close to the peak of the Invincible Realm and had a deep understanding of the 24 moves of sword, the corner of Jiang Shanyu's mouth twitched. He was sure that Moraid was no match for Mochizuki Song. Apart from him, perhaps no one present was a match for Mochizuki Song. On the surface, Wang Xiaoyao, who entered the Invincible Realm 2 years ago, was undoubtedly very good at hiding his strength. According to Jiang Shanyu's speculation, Wang Xiaoyao now even had the strength close to the peak of the Invincible Realm. His realm might be a little lower than that of Wang Yuexiang'e, but the Wang family of Beihai was best at the extreme outbreak. His saber might really be able to stop the Li family's sword. Even if he couldn't stop it, it would be more reliable for him to stop Mochizuki Song than Moraid. Wang Xiaoyao was the best choice. If Moraid and Wang Xiaoyao didn't go, who else could go? Jiang Guochu? Yagyu Kurasumi? Or Tianhai Wuji, who was also close to the peak of the Invincible Realm? No matter who went, in the face of Mochizuki Song in this state, they might die directly. They couldn't expect Li Guangtu to jump out and face this woman now. In the somewhat awkward and depressing silence, the helicopter in the air was directly bound by the domain and stopped in the air. The situation was obvious. No one was a match for Mochizuki-song. Let Wang Xiaoyao go. If this was a trap, all of them might die when they entered Mount Dibbing. If Wang Xiaoyao didn't go, any of them would also die if they went to face Mochizuki-song. So no one would choose to die. So if Wang Xiaoyao went, they would have doubts in their hearts. But if Wang Xiaoyao didn't go, they couldn't get around Mochizuki-song. This became a deadlock. Maybe, we can do it directly. All of us join hands and go to Mount Dibbing at the same time after killing her. Moraid moved his lips and suddenly said. A gaze directly swept over. Then a second gaze. A third gaze. Everyone's eyes were focused on Moraid's face. Moraid was a little embarrassed. He felt that there was something wrong with what he said, but he couldn't figure out what was wrong for a while. Jiang Shangyu rubbed his forehead and sighed. What makes you think that after we join hands to kill Mochizuki-song, we still have the possibility to go to Mount Dibbing to fight? Moraid was stunned. Jiang Guochu looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. He pointed to the direction of Mount Dibbing and said in a low voice, "We are now less than 10 kilometers away from Mount Dibbing. That is to say, now we are in the perception range of Li Tianlan and the attack range of his sword energy. If all of us join hands to fight Mochizuki-song, believe it or not, Xianyuan Feng's sword energy will arrive before you get close to her. Even if Li Tianlan doesn't take action, do you think Wang Xingxiao is a fool? Can't he just open fire? If everyone takes action at the same time, it means that the battlefield is limited to here. Do you still want to go to Mount Dibbing? If it's as you say, why aren't they firing now? Isn't it better to limit the battlefield here?" Moraid was embarrassed into anger. Jiang Guochu was stunned. Jiang Shangyu was also stunned. This was indeed a problem. Along with this question was an extremely clear memory. After Dongqing Huangtu died, he seemed to have walked all the way from Beihai to Xingzhou with ruthless ancient immortal face, and finally set foot on Mount Dibbing. That battle also ended on the North Sea behind Mount Dibbing. Hiruntu at that time, they were close to Mount Dibbing, but the other side still did not move. What was on Mount Dibbing? Jiang Shangyu frowned and had a thought of leaving again. He even considered whether it was better to limit the battlefield to the foot of Mount Dibbing. But Li Tianlan was in Mount Dibbing now. If they besieged Moongaze and Moongaze here, Li Tianlan must be the first to arrive. Their sword intent and sword chi came from the same source. In such a situation, with Mount Dibbing watching them covetously, they were not sure about Li Guangtu's current situation. Jiang Shangyu frowned and finally made up his mind. He turned around and looked at Wang Xiaoyao. His voice was calm and steady. In that case, please. Still the same sentence. Wang Xiaoyao's voice was flat. I have full sincerity about this cooperation. Of course. Jiang Shangyu smiled. I've always believed you. Wang Xiaoyao said no more. He reached out and slowly picked up the giant blade beside him. The 2-meter-long blade had an extremely brutal arc, and the bright blade shone with cold light in the cabin. Wang Xiaoyao gently stroked the blade, his movements extremely focused and gentle. The helicopter continued to move forward in Jiang Shangyu's domain, and the distance between it and Moongaze was quickly shortened. Can you win? Tianhai Wuji suddenly said. His eyes were a little hot. In the past countless eras, the Wang family of Beihai was almost the first family of swordsmanship in the Dark World. But in the so-called first family of swordsmanship, there was Wang Xiaoyao, an anomaly who used a saber. Tianhai Wuji thought of himself. He was also born in Jifeng Sword Training School, the first force of swordsmanship in East Island, but he eventually left there and founded Wuji Palace, which used sabers. Saber and sword. This was the first battle of the Invincible Realm and the final battle of Beihai. Looking at this scene, Tianhai Wuji suddenly had a very strong desire to win. This had nothing to do with the overall situation. It was only about martial arts, but it was extremely important. Wang Xiaoyao smiled and narrowed his eyes at him. We all have our reasons not to lose. He lifted the huge blade in his hand and opened the hatch. Above the sky, the fierce wind and snow poured into the cabin. Wang Xiaoyao, holding the saber in one hand, took a step forward. His body stepped on the air and stopped in midair. Moongaze and Moongaze were less than 100 meters away from him. The helicopter did not stop. It quickly passed the two and rushed directly to Mount Dibbing. Moongaze and Moongaze were expressionless and motionless. But the monstrous sword energy was boiling around her in an instant. Wang Xiaoyao, who was calm and composed, held the hilt with both hands. The blade was raised. The night full of wind and snow suddenly lit up for a moment. The pale and gloomy saber light broke the night sky, and the violent edge instantly jumped into the cabin. Several invincible realm experts in the cabin looked back at the same time. In their sight, under the flying snow, in front of Mount Dibbing, the bright saber light suddenly rose into the sky in the sky full of sword energy. It moved forward with indomitable will. Chapter 10-11. The sword energy spread out layer by layer from the top of Mount Dibbing. Li Tianlan stood quietly in the air, mercilessly draped over him. The long hem and wide sleeves of his robe fluttered gently in the flying snow. Countless golden patterns and the sword energy were perfectly integrated, covering the entire Mount Dibbing and shuttling in all directions. At his level of martial arts, it could be said that all aspects had completely exceeded the limits that the human body could reach. Within the range of tens of thousands of meters where the sword energy spread, every blade of grass and every move of everyone were extremely clear and obvious in Li Tianlan's perception and sight. He saw the helicopter flying over from Mount Dibbing. He also saw the helicopter flying over from Shenzhou. He saw flaming fire walking out of the cabin with the sword energy all over the sky. He also saw Wang Xiaoyao coming out of the cabin. The helicopter of the joint forces approached quickly. Li Tianlan's face was expressionless. He just looked in the direction of flaming fire. Flaming Fire was the first super master of Samsara Palace he met after entering the secular world. When he and Qin Weibai first met, Flaming Fire was Qin Weibai's driver. Li Tianlan's understanding of her was mostly superficial. He knew that she was absolutely loyal to Samsara Palace, that she was an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and that she was Qin Weibai's most trusted person. This was Li Tianlan's previous understanding of Flaming Fire. After the glorious end of Mormon's eternal sword, Flaming Fire directly left the Samsara Palace, which only existed in name, and did not even meet Li Tianlan. It was not until he was in the desert prison that he knew that Flaming Fire was the strongest super master in the Samsara Palace and could even be said to be the shadow of the master of Samsara Palace. A super master of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan did not feel anything when he heard the news. Perhaps the improvement of his strength had changed his mentality, and he was less in awe of the invincible realm. So when he heard the news, although he was surprised, he did not think much about it. Tonight, after more than 2 years, this was the first time he saw Flaming Fire. Flaming Fire was cold. Li Tianlan knew this very well. But in the few times they got along in the past, although Flaming Fire was quiet and cold, Li Tianlan could still feel her respect for him from her words and deeds. Whether it was because of Qin Weibai or for other reasons, there was nothing wrong with her attitude towards him. But when Flaming Fire's helicopter flew over Mount Dibbing, Li Tianlan clearly felt the gaze in the helicopter. That gaze passed through the cabin and landed on him, carrying with it an extremely complicated emotion. There was no respect. It was anger, resentment, grievance, unwillingness, and repression. Countless emotions gathered together. Li Tianlan could feel Flaming Fire's dissatisfaction with him, but he didn't know why. The helicopter flew over. There was no communication between the two. He watched as Flaming Fire blocked the way of the joint forces with the sword energy all over the sky. Countless sword chis and sword lights bloomed in his perception, and they were extremely detailed. It was so familiar. Déjà vu. It was not until this moment that Li Tianlan was really sure of something, but at the same time, he had a lot of doubts. He remembered the challenge that the master of Samsara Palace had made before the final battle in Heaven Capital that shocked the dark world. He challenged Gu Xingyan. At that time, in the Sky Academy of Huading, the one who fought with Gu Xingyan should be flaming fire in front of him. In the chaos of Snow Country, it was also Flaming Fire who had warned Li Guangtu in Wulan State and even lent him the sword energy temporarily. At that time, Li Tianlan vaguely felt that the other party's swordsmanship was familiar. The other party's sword energy was like his own sword energy, and the intensity of the sword energy did not seem to be as strong as that of the master of Samsara Palace in the legend. So at that time, he also saw Flaming Fire. Thinking back carefully, the few times he had seen the master of Samsara Palace in the past seemed to be Flaming Fire. The only thing Li Tianlan could be sure of was that on the outskirts of Mormons, before he saw the eternal sword with his own eyes, the master of Samsara Palace he saw was the master of Samsara Palace herself. The fiercest quarrel between the two broke out at that time. She called him a bastard. He called her a bitch. That bitch who gave everything, even her life, to me? It was as if a string in his mind had suddenly snapped. The strong heartbeat kept vibrating in his chest. It was his heartbeat, but it didn't seem like his heartbeat. Not knowing how far away, there seemed to be another heart beating in sync with his heart, faster and faster. On that day in Mormons, the last request the master of Samsara Palace made to him was to hold her. And the last thing she said to him was that she was sorry. In the small city in the far north, when he held her, she pierced his body with the blade in her hand. The cold blade almost passed through his heart. It was bone-chilling, heart-piercing, and heart-wrenching. For that era, that stroke was like the beginning of the end of that era. But for Li Tianlan personally, that stroke was the end of the chaos in Snow Country. After that stroke, when he woke up from his coma, the chaos in Snow Country was over. The sunshine of the new era bathed him. There was no shadow, and he was free, until today. All the memories seemed to become a little vague. But at this moment, when he saw Flaming Fire, those vaguely suppressed memories suddenly flooded out like a tide. He stood there quietly, but what he thought of was what Mormons had said to him in Fengting Pavilion before the blade pierced his chest, as well as those words. Do you know it? In the hands of the country, the murderous weapon is a national treasure. In the hands of the superpowers, it is also the last trump card. Everyone knows that Blue Sky Underworld belongs to the Samsara Palace, but in fact, this murderous weapon is now yours. When the Samsara Palace got the Cloud Silk Robe, she personally fought for it, even when she was seriously injured. The Samsara Palace lost countless elites, and the two affiliated wealthy families were wiped out. After that, the Samsara Palace lost countless favors in order to make the Cloud Silk Robe into clothes. Now, that dress is also yours. Everything that the Samsara Palace has done and all the resources in the future are also yours. You're a bastard, but did you call her a bitch? Yes, she's bitch enough. She gave you everything. Isn't that a bitch? Am I right? You don't need to apologize, and I don't ask you for anything. It's just, there are some things that are too late to regret. The extremely familiar sword energy and sword light bloomed in front of him and in his perception. There was no successor. He Jingzhao's memory, which he once thought was naturally forgotten, suddenly flooded again. His heart beat faster and faster. The calm hypnosis seemed to break through the shackles under the scouring of time. The blade seemed to pierce through his chest again. The heart-wrenching pain turned into confusion. Everything in the past began to become clear. I don't talk to bastards. In his memory, she seemed to be gritting her teeth. In the black cloak, Li Tianlan had never seen her expression and eyes clearly. You don't talk to bitches either. Okay, then let me go. I won't. Let me go. You bitch. I won't let you go. Li Tianlan, you bastard. Bitch, let me go. I won't. Let me go. I won't let you go. Come and kill me. Her words, deeds, and every move kept echoing in his mind. Some deliberately suppressed memories and doubts began to become clearer and clearer. It seemed that until now, he had not figured out why the master of Samsara Palace had helped him at all costs. It seemed that until now, he had not figured out who the master of Samsara Palace was. These doubts were sealed away in an extremely deliberate and natural manner. The shackles began to loosen little by little in the sword light in his sight. Li Tianlan suddenly remembered that if the master of Samsara Palace he saw most of the time was flaming fire, then who was the real master of Samsara Palace who helped him at all costs but died in Mormons in the end? Li Tianlan suddenly made a sound. The sharp pain in his heart seemed to be suffocating. He tried to take a deep breath and tightly pursed the corners of his mouth. What's wrong with you? Wang Xingxiao was a little confused. He was keenly aware that something was wrong with Li Tianlan. To be exact, the moment the sword light of flaming fire lit up, Li Tianlan became a little bit wrong. Nothing, it's just, Li Tianlan looked at the sword light in the distance absent-mindedly. He shook his head and finally said nothing. The helicopter in his sight began to accelerate. It passed flaming fire and Wang Xiaoyao. The sword light shone in the night with the wind and snow. The night was lit up. In an instant, the shining sword light was completely suppressed, and there was only the dazzling and domineering saber light left in the sky and on the earth. Li Tianlan suddenly narrowed his eyes, and he seemed to wake up in an instant. The crazy and domineering saber light filled the world. The moment the light lit up, the solid sword energy around Wang Yuexianga had been completely shattered by the saber light. There was no communication, no confrontation. The moment Wang Xiaoyao walked out of the cabin, he directly attacked with the saber. The 2-meter-long saber blade swept across the night sky, cutting the wind and snow. There was a harsh buzz everywhere between heaven and earth. The saber blade swept through the air, vibrating countless times at a very subtle frequency in an instant. The violent and almost irrational saber light was like a monstrous wave, surging and sweeping everything. In an instant, the figure of Wang Yuexianga was completely shrouded in it. The light leaped over the night sky, unscrupulous. At this moment, Wang Xiaoyao completely changed, from his eyes to his temperament. It was a complete change. The saber light bloomed around him layer by layer. Wang Xiaoyao held the long saber in his hand tightly, and his every move became extremely arrogant and domineering. The invasion was like fire. The saber light that tore through the night rushed wildly. Wang Xiaoyao went straight forward. His body moved in the air as if he were walking on the ground. He walked, ran, and rushed. The saber light and sword energy filled the world and kept whistling around him. In the blink of an eye, Wang Xiaoyao, who was running wildly, was covered with blood. The sword energy tore his clothes and cut wounds on his body one after another. Blood flowed out, but Wang Xiaoyao didn't seem to feel it at all. He rushed forward. More and more saber light bloomed with his body as the center. More and more violent. Wang Xiaoyao's eyes lit up. Flashing. As fast as the wind. His figure directly crossed a distance of tens of meters in the instant of a step and appeared in front of Wang Yuexianga. The huge and daunting long saber was held tightly by him and raised above his head. Downward chop. Under the snowy night, there seemed to be a dazzling lightning in the shining saber and sword. Clang. A clear and violent crash spread far in the air. Flaming fire raised her hand. A long sword that looked extremely slender was held tightly in her hand. The extremely hard and sharp blade was raised above her head and blocked Wang Xiaoyao's downward chop. The shining sword light and saber light disappeared in an instant. A circle of transparent shock waves visible to the naked eye distorted the nearby air and spread wildly under the night sky. The force of the first collision between the two directly penetrated the ground from the air. The forest within 100 meters nearby completely collapsed, the ground cracked, and the road was in a mess. Blood flowed from the corners of their mouths at the same time. Everyone was watching the first collision between the two. Li Tianlan's eyes were dazed for a moment again. He recognized the sword in Flaming Fire's hand. Its code name was Cicada Cry. This was the sword of the master of Samsara Palace. In terms of material, craftsmanship, and history, Cicada Cry was not as good as Listen to the Sea of the Wang family of Beihai, Autumn Water, which once belonged to Summer Solstice but was now held by Huangfu Qiushui, and the famous saber Millennium in Wang Xiaoyao's hand at this time. However, Cicada Cry, which was fused with more than a dozen special alloys and forged with special techniques, was also close to the peak of cold weapons. Li Tianlan looked at the sword in silence, his eyes deep and serene. The helicopter sprinted forward. Feeling the saber light behind him, Jiang Shangyu suddenly fell silent. "Your Majesty." Moraid, who was watching the battle behind him, turned around immediately and looked at Jiang Shangyu. His tone was a little confused. At this moment, he clearly felt the change of Jiang Shangyu's aura. "It's okay." Jiang Shangyu suddenly smiled and stopped looking back. He said calmly, "Let's fly straight over." The helicopter moved forward at full speed. It was less than a kilometer away from Mount Dibbing. The lights on the mountain, the palace, and the neatly arranged crowd could be clearly seen. Wang Xingxiao and Li Tianlan stood in the air and watched the helicopter getting closer and closer. "I heard that the welcome ceremony you received when you just landed in Beihai was a little special." Wang Xingxiao narrowed his eyes and laughed softly. His smile was full of cruelty. Li Tianlan was expressionless and did not speak. Autumn Water's welcome ceremony was full of gunfire and did not stop. The welcome ceremony of Autumn Water, which was full of gunfire and did not stop, was indeed very special. "What a coincidence." Wang Xingxiao continued, "I also have a very special welcome ceremony for them." The helicopter flew over. 600 meters. Wang Xingxiao raised his palm with a cold expression. 500 meters. 400 meters. 300 meters. In the helicopter, under everyone's nervous gaze, Wang Xingxiao's smile suddenly became extremely cruel. His palm fell hard. It was quiet over Mount Dibbing. Everything was calm. Nothing happened. What was it? All. Damn it. Nothing happened. There was no gunfire. Nothing at all. There was nothing at all. Wang Xingxiao's smile suddenly froze on his face. At that moment, his expression suddenly became extremely subtle. It was not panic or anger, but with a touch of absent-minded astonishment. 200 meters. The helicopter flew over. All the weapon systems of Mount Dibbing remained silent. Mount Dibbing suddenly became extremely quiet. Wang Xingxiao's body shook. He remembered the back of Wu Qinggu, who now controlled all the weapon systems of Mount Dibbing, when he left. Wu Qinggu. Wu Qinggu. How could it be? Wang Xingxiao froze in the air and did not even breathe for a while. How can there be absolute loyalty? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and said in a flat voice. 100 meters. The helicopter paused for a moment. Following which, nearly 20 figures jumped out of the cabin. Jiang Shangyu was at the forefront. Several Invincible Realm experts were slightly behind. Behind them were more than a dozen of the most powerful experts of the half-step Invincible Realm in the joint forces. Everyone rushed directly to the top of the mountain the moment they landed. A vast domain expanded wildly at the foot of the mountain, pushing all the way up. In the extremely quiet and strange atmosphere, the experts of the joint forces still remained cautious, which could be seen from their landing at the foot of the mountain. Wang Xingxiao finally came to his senses. His body trembled slightly. He did not breathe a long sigh of relief until Jiang Shangyu and others began to sprint toward the top of the mountain. "Are you very angry?" Li Tianlan asked. "No." Wang Xingxiao shook his head, and his eyes were sad. "I just feel very disappointed." Wu Qinggu, the chief person in charge of all the weapon systems of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Tianzong's best friend. Wang Xingxiao almost became his godfather when he was a child. At the most critical time of Mount Dibbing, he betrayed Mount Dibbing. What was this? Even if it really happened now, Wang Xingxiao could not come to his senses. Can you catch him? Li Tianlan asked. Wang Xingxiao shook his head with a bitter smile. The main control room of Mount Dibbing has an extremely exaggerated defense system. Because it needs to control all the weapon systems, the safety of the operator must be guaranteed. This can also ensure that no matter what happens, he will not be threatened by the outside world. Even for me, it will take some time to open the door of the main control room. There is a secret passage in the main control room that can directly lead to the underground shelter. There is a special subway line in the shelter, which can directly leave Mount Dibbing. If Wu Qingwu wants to betray us, he must have changed the activation code of the weapon system. When we enter the main control room and crack the code, the final battle may be over for a long time. Li Tianlan shook his head and said nothing. How ironic it is. Wang Xingxiao laughed self-mockingly. We and East Island both put our biggest hope on the strongest firepower coverage. But in the end, East Island lost its weapon control authority. We were laughing at them just now, but in the next moment, we also lost our authority. From this point of view, it's fair. Li Tianlan's voice was calm. I have a good uncle. Wang Xingxiao laughed with some mockery. He looked at Li Tianlan with sincere eyes. We really put a lot of hope on the weapon system, but this is not all. Your existence is the biggest trump card to ensure the outcome of Mount Dibbing. So, he looked at Li Tianlan seriously. In this situation, what else do I need to pay? Li Tianlan was silent for a while. It was really not good for him to take action now. He was not afraid of Jiang Shangyu or Li Guangtu. But if the two of them joined forces and seized the opportunity, no matter how confident Li Tianlan was, he would be fatally threatened. Without the artillery support of Mount Dibbing, his situation was undoubtedly more difficult. So Wang Xingxiao took the initiative to increase the price and asked him what he wanted. Li Tianlan shook his head gently. He had nothing that needed to rely on Mount Dibbing to get. He had already got the most important thing. Because from this moment on, the Wang family of Beihai, which had stood at the peak of the dark world for hundreds of years and had never fallen, had officially and completely lost their invincible overlord status. This era belonged to him. Wang Xingxiao would get a relatively complete Mount Dibbing, the position of patriarch, and the victory of the final battle. Losing this era and this world was the price that Wang Xingxiao paid. But what about himself? He got this world, but what did he lose? The black windbreaker slowly fell off from his body. The sword formation of 13-story buildings slowly expanded around him. One after another, famous swords rotated around Li Tianlan. The sword energy soared into the sky. Li Tianlan stretched out his hand and gently pointed. His fingers fell on one of the swords at random. The startling sword trembled violently, and the sword energy was boiling and whistling. The infinite sword energy completely turned into a substance, outlining the figure of another Li Tianlan in front of Wang Xingxiao. At this moment it was hard to say whether the startling sword carried Li Tianlan's sword energy, or whether Li Tianlan's sword energy shaped the startling sword. The two merged with each other, natural and incomparably perfect. Li Tianlan looked at the other himself in front of him and nodded. It's him. Chapter 10-12. The saber light and the sword light quickly melted in the fierce collision and disappeared completely. Saber and sword, all martial arts, were, in the final analysis, the purest power. Wang Xiaoyao and Mochizuki swordplay were less than 3 meters away from each other. The saber and the sword collided fiercely, and the powerful destructive force kept colliding in the shortest distance, like a bomb that kept exploding in a very small space. The transparent shock wave spread far away. The bodies of both sides were stretched to the limit in an instant. Their joints trembled, their blood coagulated, and their bodies lost strength for a short time. Their figures froze for a moment in the air. Everything happened in an instant. But in the blink of an eye, the power of the continuous explosion within 3 meters caused great damage to their bodies again and again. Wang Xiaoyao could not avoid the sword of Mochizuki Song. Mochizuki Song could not avoid Wang Xiaoyao's saber either. Blood gushed from the corners of his mouth. The huge power kept vibrating, squeezing his internal organs, and tearing his flesh and blood. The next second, when the saber and the sword collided, there was a dull loud noise between heaven and earth, centered on the place where the two men stood. It was like rolling winter thunder cutting through the sky. The figures of Mochizuki Song and Wang Xiaoyao flew backward at the same time. Blood bloomed in the air. Wang Xiaoyao's figure flew backward for dozens of meters before he slowly stopped. He pressed his chest and took a long breath. Then he narrowed his eyes and looked at Mochizuki Song, who also stopped. Mochizuki Song's eyes were extremely quiet. He had no reaction to Wang Xiaoyao's strength that was beyond everyone's expectations. Get out of the way. Wang Xiaoyao held the saber. The blade was slightly raised in the wind and snow, extremely stable. I don't mind fighting desperately, but I don't want to have a meaningless fight. You are the Dark Queen now. Go back to your European land, and I can pretend that none of this happened. The Wang family of Beihai that I control will not find any trouble with the Dark Knights in the future. Maybe we will have a chance to cooperate in the future. The sword energy around Mochizuki Song fluctuated, and he did not speak. Wang Xiaoyao moved forward slowly, neither arrogant nor rash. Mount Dibbing, which had fallen into a strange silence ahead, finally made a sound. The flames were shining in the headquarters of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Xiaoyao turned a deaf ear and just looked at Mochizuki Song. The Samsara Palace no longer exists. I don't know what happened between you and Little Bai. You went to the European continent. Since you made the choice at the beginning, why come back now? His first move was decisive in order to display his strength. He had already proved that he had enough strength. Next, he would undoubtedly want to talk. What are you trying to say? Mochizuki Song said coldly. You don't belong to Emperor Dong's palace or the Wang family of Beihai. I think we can talk. I have never intended to be enemies with the Dark Knights. If possible, I even hope that we can cooperate. Knights Templars now belong to Jiang Shangyu. The Holy Land had lost its most important external force. Arceus had died in Snow Country. In a short time, the Holy Land was no longer qualified to threaten others. But if I controlled the Wang family of Beihai, I would inevitably face the counterattack of Rothschild. That kind of super wealthy family with a long history, even if it was not in its heyday, was still a problem. If we cooperate, I hope the Dark Knights can contain Rothschild in the European continent. In return, when I stabilize the situation, I will use the power of the Wang family of Beihai to help you kill Rothschild and even the Holy Land. At that time, the Dark Knights will become the biggest superpower in the European continent. You will no longer be the Dark Queen of the Dark Knights. You can even become the only queen of the entire European continent. How about that? Isn't that what you want? Isn't that what you want when you left Little Bai? Mochizuki Song was silent for a while and said calmly, I have never left anyone. Wang Xiaoyao continued to move forward. The distance between the two of them continued to shrink, and he laughed. So I'm blind? You have been in the European continent for more than 2 years and have never returned to Tiannan. Why, did you fall out with Little Bai? Why don't you continue to follow her? Does she deserve it? Mochizuki Song's voice grew colder. From the beginning to the end, I only followed the palace master, not anyone. Qin Weibai, what is Qin Weibai now? Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes. A sharp killing intent flashed in his eyes almost instinctively. It doesn't matter. Wang Xiaoyao's voice became a little lower and a little indifferent. Anyway, now that your palace master has fallen, do you want to see Li Tianlan off again for the sake of our old friendship? Or is it the will of the master of Samsara Palace? She can't see what you do when you die. What's the point? Mochizuki Song quietly looked at Wang Xiaoyao, who was getting closer and closer. She gently twitched the corner of her mouth and said lightly, "What do you know?" "Oh," Wang Xiaoyao shook his head and said with a smile, "I really don't know, but what we are talking about now is what we all know. The Wang family of Beihai can't be anyone's vassal. After tonight, they and I will part ways. I need the power of the Dark Knights." Similarly, with the rise of the joint forces, I think the Dark Knights also need the power of the Wang family of Beihai. You didn't stay in Emperor Dong's palace, so I am your only choice. The wind and snow were flying. The cold wind swept through the air. He stopped less than 20 meters away from Mochizuki Song and stretched out his hands. It was a very sincere but extremely weird action. At this moment, Wang Xiaoyao held the knife in his left hand and stretched out his right hand to Mochizuki Song. The knife and his hand were both in front of him. "What's your choice?" Wang Xiaoyao asked calmly. "What qualification does a person who betrayed his own elder brother and even betrayed his own family for status have to cooperate with me?" There was no expression on Mochizuki Song's face. Her clear and bright eyes were filled with disdain and ridicule. The smile on Wang Xiaoyao's face disappeared. There seemed to be only the sound of the wind between heaven and earth. Mount Dibing, a few kilometers away, was filled with flames. Thunderbolts and flames were surging. The domain and the sword energy crisscrossed. Lights and shadows were flashing in the sky. Standing in front of Mochizuki Song, Wang Xiaoyao suddenly fell silent. There was only the sound of the wind between heaven and earth. "This is your evaluation of me?" Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a long time before he slowly asked. "This is the evaluation of the whole dark world of you." Mochizuki Song's voice was cold. Perhaps Wang Xiaoyao himself had never thought about this question carefully. More than 2 years ago, when he showed the strength of the invincible realm near the summer solstice and left Mount Dibing, his life had been extremely busy. Nominally, he was in charge of Snow Country on behalf of the Wang family of Beihai, but all the high-level officials of Beihai already knew that he had parted ways with Mount Dibing. Wang Xiaoyao was very busy. He was busy sorting out his own army, practicing his martial arts, cooperating with Wang Qinglei to secretly create all kinds of obstacles for Mount Dibing, fighting with Wang Xingxiao for the power of the Wang family of Beihai, cultivating confidence, and contacting with the people of the joint forces. He had a lot of things to do every day. Under such circumstances, he naturally ignored some things. Just like what Mochizuki Song said. The Dark World's evaluation of Wang Xiaoyao was not good. To be precise, it was extremely bad. Wang Tianzong did not have a good reputation in the hearts of the enemies of the Wang family of Beihai. But no matter how they talked about it, one thing was undeniable. Wang Tianzong was indeed a real expert in his heyday. He also had the demeanor and awareness of being an expert. He was an ambitious and domineering man. No matter what, when people mentioned Wang Tianzong, they would always be in awe instead of contempt. Wang Tianzong was indeed vicious to his enemies. But he had always been very kind to his friends and family. For hundreds of years, the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai had never mistreated any of their allies, including the former Li family. And Wang Xiaoyao had no friends now. Beside him, other than his allies, there were his subordinates, and then there were his enemies. Each and every one of them was an extremely pure circle. To some extent, it was indeed because of Wang Tianzong. Ever since he was a child, he had always been concerned about his biological brother. As the elder brother, Wang Tianzong could be said to be really meticulous. He took care of Wang Xiaoyao everywhere and took whatever he wanted. The whole dark world knew how good Wang Tianzong was to Wang Xiaoyao. They also knew how many knives, swords, and storms Wang Tianzong had blocked for Wang Xiaoyao. Everyone thought that this was a model of brotherhood in the dark world. Even in the top wealthy families, not every pair of brothers would kill each other. But under such circumstances, as soon as Wang Tianzong fell, Wang Xiaoyao betrayed the Sword Emperor and the Wang family of Beihai. The wild ambition that he had suppressed for a long time was completely exposed. His face was ferocious, which made people despise him and feel disgusted. Winner takes all? If Wang Xiaoyao succeeded, perhaps many years later, the forgetful dark world would also think that Wang Xiaoyao was an expert. But now, he was indeed somewhat looked down upon. I have never betrayed Beihai. Wang Xiaoyao laughed in a low voice. Whether you believe it or not, this is what I say. Everything I do is for the land under my feet. After he fell, only I can make Beihai better and better. Why? Why doesn't everyone approve of me? Mochizuki Song did not speak. Everything the other party said had nothing to do with her. Her shame and contempt were just an expression of her attitude. Seeing you, I suddenly think of a lot of things. Wang Xiaoyao's eyes gradually changed, becoming a little painful and a little complicated. In the wind and snow, he laughed self-deprecatingly. When I first saw Little Bai 9 years ago, it was at the charity dinner held by the Huading municipal government. On the surface, she showed that her assets were only pre-Qin International Group, so the position arranged for her by the organizer was not very prominent. But she sat in the corner, quietly and coldly, and naturally became the focus of the audience. I have never seen such a girl. She is not special or special. It is really a kind of amazing. She is there, in front of me, occupying everything. The self-deprecation on his face became more and more obvious. In the words of the internet, from the first time I saw her, I even thought of the name of our child. At that time, Wang Xiaoyao smiled with some emotion. The sound of the battle and Mount Dibbing not far away kept coming. His eyes were a little dazed. Mochizuki Song was motionless. She had been looking for opportunities. But now, Wang Xiaoyao did not show any flaws. That night, beside me was, well, Zhang Xiaohua, the supervisory minister of Huading. He took me to Little Bai. Oh, I almost forgot that you were also there at that time. He looked at Mochizuki Song. Do you remember what Zhang Xiaohua said to Little Bai? Mochizuki Song was also in a trance for a moment. It seemed that she mentioned her real boss. At this moment, she showed a fatal flaw. But Wang Xiaoyao did not make a move. He stood where he was, waiting for the answer. At the moment when Mochizuki Song was in a trance, she was shocked and her body tensed subconsciously. You don't remember? Wang Xiaoyao asked. Mochizuki Song looked at him coldly and did not speak. Wang Xiaoyao laughed. Zhang Xiaohua. When he introduced me, he just said, Boss Qin, this is the younger brother of Wang Tianzong, the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, King Xiaoyao of Beihai. He is young and promising. You should get to know each other. Ha, ha ha, ha ha ha, ha ha, ha 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 ha. Wang Xiaoyao suddenly laughed crazily, and the aura all over his body began to become a little crazy. The younger brother of Wang Tianzong, the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, King Xiaoyao of Beihai, young and promising, how ridiculous is that? It was just an introduction. Young and promising. More than a month later, when I deliberately appeared at another banquet to find Little Bai, I introduced myself, and she knew that my name was Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Tianzong's younger brother, King Xiaoyao of Beihai. I have a name. I have a name. My name is Wang Xiaoyao. My name is Wang Xiaoyao. Is this name important? Flaming Fire, Mochizuki Song, Queen of Darkness. Tell me, is this name important? Yes. Yes. Is it important? Mochizuki Song was silent. The memory from a few years ago began to become clear. She remembered that night. She remembered the banquet when Zhang Xiaohua took Wang Xiaoyao to her and Qin Weibai. At that time, she quietly looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said Wang Xiaoyao's identity. Looking at the cold and reserved boss, she just nodded and said softly with a smile, Your brother is talented, bold, and skilled in both the pen and the sword. The name of Sword Emperor resounds like thunder in my ears. I respect him very much. From that moment on, Mochizuki Song was very sure that her boss did not take King Xiaoyao of the Wang family of Beihai seriously at all. Therefore, at the banquet a month later, when Wang Xiaoyao walked up to her alone and introduced himself as Wang Xiaoyao, Qin Weibai seemed to have forgotten the previous meeting that had not caused any ripples. So she repeated what she had said before. Your brother is talented, bold, and skilled in both the pen and the sword. The name of Sword Emperor resounds like thunder in my ears. I respect him very much. Wang Xiaoyao was important. King Xiaoyao of Beihai was important. So was the name Wang Xiaoyao important? Different people had different answers in their hearts. It was just that after so many years, this answer had long become clear and deeply rooted in Wang Xiaoyao's mind. He had a name. His name was Wang Xiaoyao. For him, it was more important than anything else. I can also do something for Beihai. Wang Xingxiao murmured to himself in a low voice. He squinted and smiled. Many people will talk about me in secret. Without my brother, I would be nothing. I often ask myself, without Wang Tianzong, I would be nothing. I don't know the answer. His tone was very serious. Rather than talking to Mochizuki Song, it was better to say that he was hypnotizing himself. But I want to try. The little guy is too young, and the old guy is useless. Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile, only I can make Beihai better. In everyone's eyes, you are destroying Beihai. Mochizuki Song gave a rare response. Beihai will not be destroyed. At this moment, everything it has experienced now is nirvana. He looked at the fire on Mount Dibbing and whispered, rebirth from the fire. I want to do something for Beihai. I have to do something. He looked at Mochizuki Song. How about you and I do it together? You don't deserve it. Mochizuki Song answered without hesitation. She suddenly thought of something, and a strange look flashed in her eyes. She deliberately said sarcastically, if it's your brother, it's more like it. But King Xiaoyao can't. Wang Xiaoyao suddenly fell silent. The wind and snow fell. At 5:40 in the morning, it was still night. The deep night suddenly became incomparably oppressive. After today, I won't be King Xiaoyao anymore. The whole world will know that my name is Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao said lightly. A strong aura began to surge. His tone gradually became cold. After today, if you can survive, then we'll talk about it. Mochizuki Song confronted him with tit for tat. One has to do one thing in life. Wang Xiaoyao was expressionless. I have a woman I love the most. I'm not afraid of being laughed at. She can really extinguish all my ambitions, all my longings, and make me willing to be a coward. If I could be with her, today's events would not have happened. I was even willing to go to your Samsara palace for her. I once regarded being with her as the most important thing. But she became Li Tianlan's woman, and I failed. But I have to do something. I didn't get the woman I love the most, but others can't take away Mount Dibbing that raised me. He looked in the direction of Li Tianlan from afar, and his eyes were as sharp as a knife. When I set foot on the top of that mountain, maybe I still have a chance to have what I lost, Buzz. The moment Wang Xiaoyao turned his head, Mochizuki Song, who had been preparing for a long time to seize his flaws, suddenly made a move without any hesitation. The surging sword energy around her converged and condensed in an instant. The wind and snow scattered wildly. The surging sword energy directly condensed into a tiny but extremely bright light. The moment Mochizuki Song's figure flashed, the condensed sword energy had already stabbed in front of Wang Xiaoyao along with the sword edge. The temperature under the night sky plummeted. The wind and snow between heaven and earth completely turned into a huge vortex at the same time as the sword edge flashed. The vortex spread out, and the area became larger and larger. The snowflakes within a radius of hundreds of meters were completely attracted by the sword energy. 24 moves of sword, fifth blade, flying snow. The heavy snow was like a curtain, and the world was vast. The pure white quickly twisted and rotated, and the sword edge advanced forward, directly shrouding Wang Xiaoyao's figure. It was bitterly cold. The swirling snow vortex began to shrink with Wang Xiaoyao as the center. Mochizuki Song stood outside the snow curtain. Wang Xiaoyao was completely shrouded in snow. The cicadas kept vibrating, and Mochizuki Song's light figure seemed to become a weightless shadow at this moment. The shadow turned around the shrinking snow curtain, like light and lightning. The cicada's sword edge pierced the snow curtain again and again with the extremely sharp sword energy. This scene looked like a faint shadow wielding a sword, circling around a large snow tornado and stabbing forward. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of the collision of swords and sabers rang out intensely, like a storm. Mochizuki Song's eyes were deathly still, and her spirit was condensed like never before. In front of her, the tornado condensed by snowflakes completely enveloped Wang Xiaoyao. While blocking his vision, the increasingly violent sword energy penetrated through the snow curtain tornado. The sword energy was surging like a tide, and the whole world seemed to be shaking violently. From the sky to the ground. Flying snow fell from the sky. On the ground, countless broken trees and fallen leaves flew at the same time. At this moment, everything within the scope of Mochizuki Song's sword energy seemed to become the sword in her hand. Every snowflake, every fallen leaf, every wisp of cold wind, the sky and the earth were all sharp. The sound of the collision of swords and sabers became more and more intense. The scope of the snow curtain tornado was still shrinking. This also meant that Wang Xiaoyao's scope of activity was getting smaller and smaller. Every snowflake in the tornado was blooming with sword energy, trying to completely tear Wang Xiaoyao's body apart. The cicada's cry pierced in again and again, and every sword was aimed at Wang Xiaoyao's vital parts. The scope of the snow curtain tornado was shrinking faster and faster. The speed of Mochizuki Song's sword began to slow down, but it became heavier and heavier. In the tornado, Wang Xiaoyao, whose scope of activity had been shrinking, remained silent, but the strength of his saber was increasing at the same time. Countless fallen leaves, dead branches, stones, and even dust rose from the ground. The speed was constantly accelerating, and the momentum was becoming sharper and sharper. The shining blade of the cicadas once again stabbed into the wind and snow. The blade with violent power chopped on the blade of the cicadas almost at the same time. Mochizuki Song's figure paused slightly. In an instant, the light that had been attached to the blade, condensed by the sword energy all over the sky, directly exploded in the snow curtain tornado that was about to shrink to the limit. The strong light directly covered the wind and snow. Between heaven and earth, within a range of hundreds of meters, everything that could be controlled was madly accelerating, stabbing Wang Xiaoyao's position. Heaven and earth were like swords. Mochizuki Song's face was slightly pale for a moment, and there was a slight fluctuation in her breath. In the next second, her entire face instantly changed. The snow curtain tornado that was still condensed began to expand without warning. The huge tornado stagnated for a moment, and the wind and snow in the sky began to spin in the opposite direction incredibly. The flying wind and snow rose against the sky, and the leaves and dead branches that pierced upward on the ground accelerated to fall. The countless sword energy that Mochizuki Song had stabbed into the tornado began to spread outward. Everything seemed to be completely reversed in an instant. Everything created by Mochizuki Song began to move in the opposite direction. Boom! In the loud rumbling sound, the snow curtain tornado, which had been condensing and shrinking, suddenly spread out in the opposite direction at a speed countless times faster than before, enveloping the figure of Mochizuki Song. Wang Xiaoyao's voice came from the dancing wind and snow. Have you forgotten what the strongest martial arts in Beihai is? The strongest in Beihai was naturally swordsmanship. And in Beihai's swordsmanship, the strongest was the 6 paths of reincarnation sword. This is my reincarnation. In the voice that was almost murmuring to himself, Wang Xiaoyao's breath began to rise endlessly. His figure moved forward in the swirling snowflakes. Countless snowflakes were still flying with sword energy, but they were guided by countless blade lights to fly in the opposite direction from Wang Xiaoyao. You refused my invitation to cooperate." His voice carried a hint of laughter, but it was extremely cold and deranged. Then, the huge blade of the famous saber named Millennium was raised. The handle was held in Wang Xiaoyao's hand. It was the palm that had been showing sincerity before. Left hand. Left-handed saber. Holding the blade in his left hand, Wang Xiaoyao's breath had reached the extreme. It was a kind of indescribable thick and domineering. It could destroy heaven and earth and was irresistible. His body began to accelerate. His aura continued to rise, and in an instant, he easily crossed the threshold. The threshold that countless invincible realm experts dreamed of but could not get for their whole lives. The peak of the invincible realm. It was not close, not infinitely close, not almost. It was the real, complete, and at the peak. In this era, the only expert at the peak of the invincible realm in the dark world, Wang Xiaoyao. Flaming Fire's pupils suddenly contracted for a moment. Was it an accident? Was it a shock? Perhaps all of them were present, but all of this wasn't unacceptable. Wang Xiaoyao, the peak of the invincible realm. No one knew when he entered the invincible realm, when he stabilized his realm, and when he officially entered the peak of the invincible realm. What he showed to the world was always what was on the surface. But in front of Mount Dibbing, for the sake of Beihai and his position as the patriarch, Wang Xiaoyao no longer held back when facing a strong enemy. The strongest super master of the Samsara Palace, the Queen of Darkness. No matter who it was, he would completely tear up the opponent in the fastest time with the most crushing posture, and then kill Mount Dibbing. He gave her a chance. But it was a pity. If she didn't retreat, she would die. The breath belonging to the peak of the invincible realm rushed into the sky with the saber light in an instant, completely suppressing the sword intent and sword energy around Flaming Fire. Wang Xiaoyao raised Millennium in his hand. His temperament suddenly became extremely quiet, but there was absolute madness in it. The almost out-of-control power kept colliding in the saber light, and heaven and earth seemed to be shaking violently. The hysterical and crazy killing intent completely locked on Mochizuki and Song. Wang Xiaoyao's voice was cold. This saber is called World's Edge. Wang Xiaoyao's saber. The saber at the peak of the invincible realm. The bright and turbulent saber light suddenly bloomed in the night, moving forward with indomitable momentum and determination. The saber. It was a domineering weapon that could only advance and not retreat. The saber light, like a raging tide, completely broke the night sky and the world. In the endless light, Wang Xiaoyao's figure looked conceited and proud. He didn't even look at Flaming Fire. His eyes fell in the direction of Mount Dibbing. Across that mountain, the whole world would officially see him. Not the younger brother of Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong, not King Xiaoyao of Beihai. The whole world would see the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. The saber light and power of the peak of the invincible realm. This year, Wang Xiaoyao was 38 years old. At the age of 38, he reached the peak of the invincible realm. In the wind and snow, he tightly pursed his lips. His name was Wang Xiaoyao. In this world, in this era, he deserved his own name. Chapter 1013. At any time and in any era, the peak of the invincible realm meant the top combat capability in the dark world. On some specific battlefields, an expert at the peak of the invincible realm was almost synonymous with destroying the world. Before this saber strike, no one would associate this word with Wang Xiaoyao. The dark world had an impression of Wang Xiaoyao. King Xiaoyao of Beihai, Wang Tianzong's younger brother. No one would ignore such a figure. Before he broke with Mount Dibbing, in everyone's eyes, he was a relatively unrestrained figure. His prominent identity, gentle personality, generous way of doing things, and handsome appearance were all important reasons to make countless ladies fall in love with him. Wang Xiaoyao's life had always been unrestrained, but he had also done some absurd things. In conclusion, in the eyes of the dark world, Wang Xiaoyao was roughly a playboy of Beihai who had excellent martial arts talent but was not willing to work hard. Even if he could enter the invincible realm, this impression had not changed much. Until now. The saber of the peak of the invincible realm. The saber light all over the sky not only shattered the sword energy of Wang Yueshuanga, but also completely shattered the impression of him in the dark world. Beihai, which inherited swordsmanship, had produced many saber masters. But when it came to the saber of Beihai, people would think of DK, who was known as Heaven Saber, and Dijiang, who had double thunder veins. Even people's evaluation of Wang Xiaoyao was not as good as Dijiang, who was locked up in Beihai prison. This night, Wang Xiaoyao raised the blade in his hand and told the whole dark world the clearest fact. His name was Wang Xiaoyao. He was the only expert at the peak of the invincible realm in the dark world. He was also the #1 saber grandmaster in the dark world. The saber light broke through the air. So close yet so far away. With almost incomprehensible power, the huge blade directly chopped down from above Wang Yueshuanga. It was swift, powerful, ruthless, and domineering. The saber light was blooming everywhere between heaven and earth. The saber light gushed from the ground and fell from the sky. Snowflakes scattered, and the sound of the wind was scattered. Vaguely, the ancient blade seemed to occupy the whole sky in an instant, chopping down with an unstoppable momentum. There seemed to be an error in perception. Mochizuki Seiko felt that his movements began to slow down. It was also like Wang Xiaoyao's saber was too fast. Within the range covered by the saber light, some rules about speed seemed to be modified a little. In a weak but extremely clear sense of disorder, Mochizuki Seiko lifted the sword edge. Clang! The huge blade slashed down on the sword's edge. Mochizuki Song's movements slowed down for a moment. Before she could raise the sword in her hand, the blade had already smashed down. At the same time, the saber radiance that filled the world vibrated. In the next instant, Mochizuki Song's body burst with blood. This was an absolute suppression of power. This was the absolute suppression of the saber gleam against the sword aura. In this state, even if Wang Xiaoyao was at the peak of the invincible realm, he could be regarded as an expert. Blood splashed in the saber light. Wang Xiaoyao's figure did not hesitate. With a flash of light, he held the hilt of the saber, and the huge blade directly stabbed Mochizuki Song's heart. Mochizuki Hikari, whose body was shaking violently, turned pale. The injuries she had been suppressing were almost completely unleashed by this slash. There were no fancy moves or changes in this slash. Tianya. This was one of the strongest moves in Wang Xiaoyao's martial arts that had gradually become a system of its own. It was also the simplest move. It was simple and didn't even have any changes. This was the perfect combination of the purest strength and speed, and it was also the essence of Beihai martial arts. In a space similar to a domain constructed by infinite saber light, when the opponent's perception of speed was wrong, this slash with pure strength and speed could completely crush everything. The blade came head-on. Mochizuki Song's violently shaking figure moved horizontally for a moment with difficulty. Before she could stand firm, Wang Xiaoyao, who had already appeared in front of her, fiercely chopped down again. It was like silver lightning splitting the sky. The moment the saber and the sword collided, Mochizuki Song, whose whole body was burning with sword energy, was directly chopped down from midair. Her body fell rapidly like a meteor. The saber was like thunder. She was like a fierce tiger. Wang Xiaoyao's eyes were shining. Without the slightest hesitation, he held the saber and pounced straight down from the air. At this moment, Wang Xiaoyao's whole body carried a kind of undisguised wildness and insolence, like a beast hunting its prey. The two of them fell rapidly, one up and the other down. Wang Xiaoyao raised his saber. It was still chopping down. The moment Mochizuki Song's figure landed, she directly abandoned the so-called image and rolled on the ground. As soon as her body moved, the huge and bright saber directly chopped the ground from her side. Boom! The loud sound even suppressed all the sounds on Mount Dibbing not far away for a moment. Under the night sky, in the flying snow, the saber light stretched all the way from mid-air to the ground. The moment the saber chopped the ground, there was a loud sound like an explosion. The bright saber light bloomed unscrupulously and destroyed everything. The transparent shock wave mixed with the saber light spread out in all directions. The forest hundreds of meters nearby was completely torn apart by the crazy saber light in an instant. Tree trunks, leaves, and grass were all torn into powder. The ground collapsed, and the water under the ground suddenly sprayed into the sky under great pressure. A large pit of about 300 or 400 meters abruptly appeared on the flat ground. The water under the ground continued to spread up. Although Mochizuki-san's body avoided the saber, the huge force directly swept her into the air. At the moment when her body lost balance, Wang Xiaoyao, who was in a very stable state, flashed to Mochizuki-san again with a cold expression. Chopping, sweeping, and lifting. Countless attacks broke out at the same time like a storm. The saber and sword collided, and the saber light was unparalleled and fierce. Countless rays of light were surging and mighty. All the sword light was torn apart little by little again. This was a head-on suppression of strength, fair and square. She couldn't even find a chance to fight back. The saber light completely shattered the sword energy and completely enveloped Mochizuki-san. In an instant, Mochizuki-san, whose face was almost bloodless, raised the blade. 21st blade, shatter of land. The surging sword energy burst out from Mochizuki-san's body. She held cicada cry and stabbed forward. At the same time, the saber light all over the sky suddenly converged. The mountains and rivers were not broken, but they suddenly disappeared. Mochizuki-san, who stabbed forward, suddenly lost balance. Her swaying body staggered a step forward. The saber light swept over silently. Flaming Fire's face changed dramatically, regardless of the aggravation of her injury. She suddenly changed the attack direction of the blade, trying to block the blade sweeping over from the side. But she was still a second too late. Her body tried to dodge. The next moment, the saber light tore her flesh. Mochizuki-san's arm holding the sword suddenly rose into the sky. An extremely sharp killing intent suddenly came from a distance and firmly locked on Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao was not afraid at all. He turned and looked in the direction of Mount Dibbing. Facing His Majesty, the only one recognized by the dark world on Mount Dibbing, he laughed wildly. "Li Tianlan, do you dare to fight with me?" Chapter 10:14. Wang Xiaoyao's voice spread far away in the night with the power of the peak invincible realm. It was passionate and indulgent, like a thunder echoing near Mount Dibbing. Everyone on Mount Dibbing heard this sentence. It was a sentence that could be said to be overestimating one's capabilities, but it was also extremely provocative. Since Li Tianlan entered the secular world, he had met people he couldn't beat, but there was no one he didn't dare to beat. Wang Xiaoyao's words were tantamount to a great humiliation. Wind and snow filled the sky. A large expanse of wind and snow swirled wildly around Wang Xiaoyao's body. The ancient giant blade pointed at Li Tianlan from a distance. At this moment, Wang Xiaoyao's whole body was filled with an indescribable arrogance. On Mount Dibbing, Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. His gaze pierced through the fluttering snow and saw the fresh blood in the snow. Mochizuki-san's arm fluttered in the air, and a large amount of blood flowed from her amputated arm. Under the immense pain, her face contorted slightly, and her condition fell to rock bottom in an instant. Wang Xiaoyao won. It was an incomparably straightforward suppression. What he won wasn't just victory or defeat, he also won life and death. With the ancient blade, he could take Mochizuki-san's life at any time. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Xiaoyao's saber quietly. He looked at Wang Xiaoyao's face. Wang Xiaoyao was also looking at him from afar with a sneer on his face. The moment Wang Xiaoyao cut off Moongaze and Song, the killing intent that almost froze the space came from Li Tianlan. No matter what had happened between Mochizuki-san and Qin Weibai after the destruction of the Samsara Palace, her appearance here today had already shown her attitude. More than 2 years ago in Reki City, on the night of the trial day, Raphael of the Dark Knights almost saved Li Tianlan at the cost of serious injuries that he had not yet recovered from. Their friendship in the past meant that Li Tianlan could not watch Mochizuki Sange die. A warning from a few kilometers away was indeed a powerful deterrent. The perfection of Li Tianlan's martial arts and the power of ruthlessness were enough to allow Li Tianlan to appear in front of Wang Xiaoyao despite the distance of a few kilometers in an instant. At that time, Wang Xiaoyao's fate might not be better than Mochizuki Sang's. It might even be more miserable. But the problem was, did Li Tianlan dare? Wang Xiaoyao laughed more and more wildly. His low voice seemed very light in the night, but it echoed throughout the whole world. You don't dare, do you? Li Tianlan did not speak. Raging fire was everywhere on Mount Dibbing. The fire spread and exploded in the air. This was almost the last power on Mount Dibbing. Heaven Punishment Unit. To be more precise, they were the backup forces of the Heaven Punishment Troop. The genuine All Heavens Troop was fighting back against Kanglan Army. At the moment, those who were left on Mount Dibbing were 200 reserve members of the All Heavens Troop, as well as 1 expert of the half-step invincible realm and 3 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, who barely stayed after Wang Xingxiao had shown all his strength. This was all the power of Beihai on Mount Dibbing. It seemed that since the establishment of the Wang family of Beihai, the force of Mount Dibbing had never been so stretched. This was naturally due to the fact that the combined strength of the allied forces was too great. It was also because Wang Xiaoyao took away some high-end combat power. 200 fire-flaming realm experts cooperated with several experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Several experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm assisted the only expert of the half-step invincible realm. They barely formed a relatively smaller Heaven Punishment Sword formation. The tacit cooperation almost made more than 200 people completely become one person. The raging fire that was enough to burn everything kept sweeping. The entire Mount Dibbing was within the scope of the sword formation. The sword energy shone in the sword formation. Li Tianlan, who was transformed by the startling sword, blocked Jiang Guochu and Yagyu Kurasumi alone in the Heaven Punishment Sword formation. Most of the power of the Heaven Punishment Sword formation was poured on Moraid. The saber light was invincible. Tianhai Wuji and more than a dozen experts of the half-step invincible realm from the allied forces were almost unrestrained. Tianhai Wuji was the number 1 expert in East Island. He was a great grandmaster of East Island who had entered the top 10 of the World Divine List 6 or 7 years ago. Although he had not officially stepped into the peak of the invincible realm, he was not far from that realm. The saber of Wuji Palace was swift and fierce. Tianhai Wuji personally took action, together with more than a dozen experts of the invincible realm. Almost at the moment of the battle, the reserve troop of the Heaven Punishment Force was shaky. The reserve force of the Heaven Punishment Force was constantly decreasing. The startling sword turned blue. The ruthless energy was not fast, but it was consumed very steadily. The sword formation of the 13-story buildings made Li Tianlan feel the ruthless state at any time. There were attacks from all directions. Tianhai Wuji and more than a dozen experts of the half-step invincible realm were tearing the Heaven Punishment Sword formation. At the same time, they were also cooperating with Jiang Guochu and Yagyu Kurasumi to interfere with Li Tianlan's famous sword doppelganger. Everyone could see that the power of Mount Dibbing was hard to hold on. If several experts of the invincible realm broke out with all their strength, Li Tianlan's famous sword doppelganger could retreat unscathed, but the all-heaven sword formation was destined to suffer heavy losses. In its heyday, the full all-heaven sword formation could fight against experts at the peak of the invincible realm. But now the reserve force of the all-heaven sword formation was different. For the real all-heaven army, the number of people was reduced by a third, and the number of experts of the thunder-shocking realm was even lower. They were not only facing Moraid, who was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm, but also Tianhai Wuji and more than a dozen experts of the half-step invincible realm. It was impossible for the all-heaven sword formation to resist. Wang Xingxiao's original plan was to use the all-heaven sword formation as a supplement and the absolute strong firepower coverage of Mount Dibbing as the main force. At the beginning of the final battle, as soon as the communication was restored, Mount Dibbing had already started all the weapon systems and strictly planned the range and firepower. In the many simulations in advance, even if it was the worst result, the situation would be beneficial to Beihai. Of course, Wang Xingxiao could think of East Island. With the support of his expectations and the results of many simulations, Mount Dibbing was almost sure that even if they were attacked by the firepower of East Island, the fully activated weapon systems of Mount Dibbing were enough to cause a fatal threat to several experts of the invincible realm on the mountain at this time. Even if they couldn't hurt Jiang Shanyu, when thousands of weapon terminals burst out at the same time, they could consume most of Jiang Shanyu's physical strength. East Island had an accident before the war, and the weapon control system hadn't been taken back yet. What was even more ridiculous was that East Island hadn't found it yet. Wang Xingxiao looked calm and collected, but he was ecstatic in his heart. More than once, he complained that the other side was a complete idiot. His wealth had been F*King emptied, but he still didn't know it. He was simply a weirdo in the international history of the past 100 years. And because of this, he was more confident in the final battle. Without the threat from East Island, the weapons on Mount Dibbing could crush everything without any scruples. This was the best situation. Yagyu Kurumi, Tianhai Wuji, Jiang Guochu, Morade, Jiang Shangyu, and Wang Xiaoyao. Joint forces. Such a lineup was indeed suffocating. But once the weapon system on Mount Dibbing started firing, Wang Xingxiao could be sure that at least the weakest Yagyu Kurumi and Jiang Guochu were doomed to die, unless Jiang Shangyu saved them at the cost of his physical strength. When the suppression of firepower was over, the forces of all heavens could come out to clean up the mess and further weaken their state and physical strength. Then it was time for Li Tianlan to come in and harvest this era. But Wang Xingxiao didn't expect that when several invincible realm experts stepped into the range of firepower, nothing happened on Mount Dibbing. Wu Qinggu, who had been the most loyal to Mount Dibbing, was missing. All the weapon systems in Beihai were locked. Although Wang Xiaoyao was temporarily stalled by Moongay's song, the forces of all heavens were going to face several invincible realm experts in their heyday. Such a situation was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue for Wang Xingxiao. Wu Qinggu. This uncle whom he had always trusted the most stabbed him in the back when he needed strength the most. A near-fatal stab. The situation in front of him was slowly collapsing at an unchangeable speed. Wang Xingxiao suddenly glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan stood where he was in silence, motionless. Wang Xingxiao understood Li Tianlan's difficulties very well. As East Emperor, he was really in a difficult position now. The collapse of Mount Dibbing was happening little by little. But until now, Jiang Shangyu had not made a move. He quietly floated in the air, observing Mount Dibbing, Li Tianlan, and Wang Xingxiao, with a kind of calmness that everything was under control. With the power of the joint forces at this time, they could speed up the collapse of Mount Dibbing several times, even dozens of times. If several invincible realm experts were willing to pay some price, such as some moderate injuries, they could even make the situation of Mount Dibbing collapse in an instant and destroy all the forces that could resist on Mount Dibbing. But they had never done so. But they had never done so from beginning to end. Because once the Sky Punishment Sword formation was broken, they would face Li Tianlan with all his strength. Because Jiang Shangyu had not made a move yet. And because Li Guangtu had not appeared yet. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were a little self-deprecating and sarcastic. Obviously, in the hearts of the joint forces at this time, although this was the final battle of Beihai, the Wang family of Beihai was no longer important. This had become the battlefield against the young East Emperor. So the joint forces were deliberately pulling the battle situation. The key to breaking the situation was the battle between Moongay's song and Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao had the ability to kill Moongay's song. Li Tianlan had the ability and reason to save Moongay's song from Wang Xiaoyao. When the battle situation was in a stalemate, once Moongay's song was in a life-or-death crisis and Li Tianlan tried his best to kill Wang Xiaoyao, it was likely that Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu would break out with all their strength. The final result of the final battle of Beihai was the moment that could happen at any time. So the battle situation on Mount Dibing was in a stalemate. Tianhai Wuji was not in a hurry to break the situation. And Wang Xiaoyao was not in a hurry to kill Moongei's song. He used himself as bait to provoke Li Tianlan. Waiting for Li Tianlan to take the bait. He was a real expert at the peak of the invincible realm. And judging from the strength he had hidden for a long time and exposed at this time, even among the experts at the peak of the invincible realm, he was not weak. If Li Tianlan wanted to injure or even kill him in an instant, he had to do it in person, or he had to break out his energy mercilessly. Wang Xiaoyao was the only expert at the peak of the invincible realm in the dark world. Such a Wang Xiaoyao was much more difficult to deal with than Gu Xingyun. Li Tianlan could only choose one of them. Wang Yuesong had to be saved. No matter which one Li Tianlan chose, it was completely acceptable to the joint forces. If Li Guangtu and Jiang Shangyu, who were probably nearby, attacked with all their strength at the same time, Li Tianlan was likely to die on the spot. At worst, he would be seriously injured and have to withdraw from the battle in North Sea. If Wu Qing took action, he would have to bear the full force of Wang Xiaoyao's outburst. Coupled with the cooperation of Li Guangtu and Jiang Shangyu, even if Wu Qing could save Meng Xiang'e, he would inevitably exhaust all his energy. At that time, Tianhai Wuji would break the deadlock and Li Tianlan would have to face a siege. Jiang Shangyu, Li Guangtu. Two superiors who had surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. Wang Xiaoyao was at the peak of the invincible realm. Tianhai Wuji and Moraid were close to the peak of the invincible realm. Jiang Guochu and Yagyu Kurumi were two invincible realm experts. And more than a dozen top superiors of the half-step invincible realm. This lineup was almost more exaggerated than the one that besieged Wang Tianzong in Mormons. Without ruthlessness, it was impossible for Li Tianlan to block it. The joint forces didn't even need to pay a price to heavily injure him. How could Li Tianlan choose? Give up Meng Xiang'e? According to Wang Xingxiao's understanding of him, this option almost didn't exist. In contrast, it was more likely for Li Tianlan to give up the final battle in Beihai. Wang Xingxiao sighed softly. His body slowly moved forward in the air, passing by the silent Li Tianlan. Second uncle. His voice spread far away in the night with the wind and snow. This was the darkest time before dawn. Wang Xingxiao's voice was steady and calm. Let me play with you. Countless eyes focused on Wang Xingxiao at once. Jiang Shangyu, Moraid, Tianhai Wuji, the eyes of several superiors of the invincible realm froze at the same time. On the stalemate battlefield, the pressure on the troops of all heavens and aquamarine suddenly relaxed for a moment. In the next second, all eyes shifted away from Wang Xingxiao. With Wang Xingxiao hiding his strength before, the moment Wang Xingxiao spoke, everyone thought that Wang Xingxiao was also hiding his strength. However, at this time, he just stood there, showing the aura of the half-step invincible realm. The strength of the half-step invincible realm was already unexpected. But to play with Wang Xiaoyao? Wang Xiaoyao stood in the air, and the eyes of uncle and nephew collided fiercely with each other thousands of meters away. Wang Xingxiao smiled and said softly, "Do you deserve it? If you can't afford to play, you will die. Whoever can't afford to play will die." Wang Xingxiao looked at Wang Xiaoyao and said softly. Wang Xiaoyao sneered. His eyes passed over Wang Xingxiao and locked on Li Tianlan. At this point, he indeed had the capital to look down on Wang Xingxiao. Wang Yueshuang's slightly trembling body was lying in front of Wang Xingxiao at this time, and the broken arm was still sprinkled with blood. The blade was placed above Wang Yueshuang's head. Wang Xingxiao looked at Li Tianlan and said in a cold voice, "I'll count to 3. If you don't come, she will die." 3. Li Tianlan suddenly narrowed his eyes. The 13 floors kept rotating around him, getting clearer and clearer. He knew Wang Xiaoyao's plan. But there were some things that one couldn't avoid being fooled after knowing. This was an overt plot on the battlefield. Wang Xiaoyao twitched the corner of his mouth and said directly, 1. There was no 2. As his voice fell, the ancient giant blade suddenly pressed down. Wang Xiaoyao. Suddenly, a huge resistance came from the edge of the blade. Amidst the snow, Mochizuki-song suddenly stretched out his hand and blocked the blade that was pressing down. An unprecedented aura suddenly rose from Wang Wuxianga's body. It was indifferent, fake, but it continued to grow stronger. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and seemed a little surprised. Crack. At the same time, in the cabin of the helicopter over East Island, Xianyuan Wushang, who had been watching the scene of Mount Dibbing, suddenly twisted the bottle of pure water in his hand. He stared at Wang Wuxianga on the screen, stunned, and stood up subconsciously. What's this? He subconsciously cried out in surprise. Fraud. Xing Tian said in a deep voice, "You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."